School District Board of Directors utilizes the working session process as a way to consider agenda items as one large committee for the purposes of discussion and debate in full view of the public. Time permitting, the committee chairperson may open the meeting up for public questions on items being discussed by the committee at the time. We're going to start this evening with teen mental health and first aid. Dr. Stepp.
Can I have Mr. Bentman come up for this presentation?
Okay, I think we're on. Great. Good evening, school board members. I am happy here to present a special guest we have this evening, two special guests actually. So we have Krista Kipczynski and Adrienne Dever. They are here from the IU. Krista is a anxiety specialist. She's a mental health first aid coordinator and a training consultant with the IU, as well as her colleague behind me. And so Krista's going to talk about teen mental health first aid, which we're really excited to bring this program to our 10th grade next year in the fall, but we wanted to have an informational session about it. Just a brief aside, I've had an opportunity to work with Krista in groups and also with the Brandywine Health Foundation for probably over about 6 or 7 years. So together with many other trainers, we trained over thousands of people in Chester County in youth mental health first aid. Teen mental health first aid is something a little newer to the whole program. And so we thought it would be a fantastic idea, myself and Mr. Kohler, to bring this to the high school next year. And Krista's here to talk a little bit about the program.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. So just a little bit about teen mental health first aid. We have to go back to what mental health first aid is and where it came from. So mental health first aid first came to Australia in 2000. It came to the United States in 2008, and that was adults helping other adults. That's called adult mental health first aid. And then in 2012, they brought the youth program to the United States. That's adults helping and supporting the youth of today. And those programs have proven to be effective, hoping to be able to prevent suicide, mental health crises, and to promote mental health. So then they basically went through and did lots of research, and saw that why teen mental health first aid? So first of all, we know that 1 in 5 teens in the United States experience a mental health challenge by the time they're 18. And those are just the ones that are diagnosed, that have come forward. So it doesn't account for many other individuals that are experiencing some of those same concerns. Next. So they take a look at then next. Another concern why we need teen mental health first aid is individuals are not seeking help. So you can see there in the United States, we only have about 64% they're not seeking help. That's a huge barrier. So we need to work on getting those numbers to more the other side, whereas we're getting more individuals feeling brave and feeling like they have the power to be able to get help and seek help. Next. So then we looked into this further, and over the last couple years, they looked at the data and said, okay, it's been great to be able to train so many individuals in youth and adult mental health first aid. But they started asking the teenagers of today, so our 15 to 18-year-olds, and they said, who do you go to when you're having some really hard emotions and when you're feeling concerned about yourself or you're just really feeling overly anxious? They said they go to their friends. So before they go to parents, caregivers, or any type of guardians, they go to their friends first. So that's why teen mental health first aid. So other friends are going to other friends that don't have the skills or know what to do in that moment. It could be a crisis scenario. So many times, so many of these young people are getting information about a mental health concern or maybe even a potential suicide before maybe some of us on the crisis team at the IU are getting that information. Next. All right, so we want to spend very little time on this, but just looking at the objectives. Really the most important part is, and we spent a lot of time with the students talking about this, is their main job is to look for those warning signs. So instead of just saying, oh yeah, that happened with so-and-so, or yeah, I saw that and I just kind of walked away, but instead now bringing more meaning to that. So you see these things, you ask your friend, you're willing to listen, and then right away connecting them to that adult. It's really important that we make sure that the students understand they're not responsible for getting their friend better. They're responsible to look at those warning signs instead of just keeping them to themselves or going on to the next post that they see. Go ahead and tell that trusted adult, and we help them find who those trusted adults are in their lives. as well as we make sure we connect them with appropriate resources, because so many of our young people love to Google. So we want to make sure that we give them those resources. So we design a Padlet for the all the students. When they walk away from the course, when it's all complete, they have an entire Padlet of resources to go to. Next. All right, so this is actually the action plan. So throughout the course, the 6 sessions, we go through each of these steps. They learn how to look for the warning signs, ask their friend how they're doing, listen, help them connect with an adult, and then remembering their friendship is super important before, during, and after that crisis scenario. Next. There's many ways you can offer this. ONJ Roberts has decided on the 10th grade, as well as going with the 6 by 45 minutes. And this is going to be offered through this in the school year. Next. There's lots of evaluations. Unfortunately, we don't have a time to talk about all of them today, but I wanted to make sure I brought up this one just so you can see what we're measuring. So the very first evaluation was done in Australia through the international evaluation study you see here. And what they're really looking for is that there is an increased mental health literacy, that our students felt more comfortable talking about mental health concerns, and then viewed seeking help more positively and less of a barrier. And then also reported less psychological distress. Those same parts were continued to be studied through Johns Hopkins in the United States. Next. Just to give you a minute about that, Johns Hopkins study is ongoing. So this has been already been approved for 10th to 12th graders. However, it's also an approval process for 9th graders as we speak. Every single time we complete a session, all 6 sessions, every student completes a pre and a post survey. So this is ongoing to continue to get that evidence-based information, make sure this is research-driven, that our students are getting the most up-to-date and the most research-based information. Looking at teen safety, this is the utmost important for us. We want to make sure that all of our students are safe. So after each session, they all will fill out an exit ticket that looks just like that. And we do a check-in. So after the 45-minute session, we want to make sure, how are they feeling? Are they concerned about themselves or others, or maybe nobody? And if so, when would you like that check-in? And then if you would like to tell us what you learned, or if you have a question that you would like answered. There's always at least 2 adults in the classroom with the students, if not even more. And again, the way the program is set up, it's very repetitive. So we make sure the students are getting really important information, but we're highlighting some really good takeaways, as well as having those national as well as local resources. Next. So this is the site implementation plan. So your staff members already gone through the youth mental health first aid training. So as part of the team program, you must have 10% of the building staff to be trained in youth mental health first aid, so that we can have more people in the building to be able to support the students when they want to have a conversation with that trusted adult. We are going to have a parent guardian information meeting. That's to be decided on what date that will be in the fall. The students will complete that pre-evaluation, as I had talked about, prior to the session beginning. And then those are dates that have been decided upon for the sessions, or the 6 sessions for the fall. We also have sessions for the spring as well. After it's done, we will offer to have that post survey for the students. They will receive a certificate and a bracelet in completion of the program. Next. This is just an example. If you wanted to hit the QR code, you could. Basically, this is an example of what we would provide to the students as far as a Padlet of resources. All of them are clickable links and access that they can have access to throughout their entire years at ONJ Roberts. And again, why are we doing this? Because all of our students want to Google. And a lot of times those aren't vetted resources. So all these resources that we're giving to our students are vetted here, and many of them are right here in Chester County. It also gives them options if they don't feel comfortable talking to someone they know, that there's warm lines they can go to in Chester County. There's also crisis lines. So we make sure we make it quick and easy for them so they know how to get the information as quick as possible, and it's safe. Next. So here's the end. So again, my name is Krista Kapczynski. If you have any questions for me, that's my email address, and that's also resources for you as a takeaway there in the corner there, just to kind of go along with the the resources I showed you for the students. But again, that is resources for you to take away if you would like to click on that as well. Thank you.
All right. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. And this may be a question for Mr. Bentman, the 10% of staff to be trained, is that a certain type of staff? Are we looking at those already in our counseling departments, or would that include classroom teachers who students may be more comfortable approaching, or, what will that 10% of our staff look like?
So far, the 10% includes our health and PE teachers. We decided to run this through health and PE because it's connected directly to the health curriculum. And as we continue to develop the health curriculum into next year with this new class, right, or refresh class, we have the opportunity to touch on subjects that are directly connected to teen mental health first aid. So we have our health and PE teachers. We also have our counseling team, so our 6 high school counselors. We have our SAP program, or our crisis interventionist counselors that are trained already. So we had an opportunity for them to be trained, but they're actually trained already. And we have some of our special education teachers that were just trained as well. I believe 3 of them. We would like to continue to train more in youth mental health first aid. That would be a goal, and I would love for that to happen. The caveat to that is the time. Unfortunately, the training is a full PD day, and what I mean by full, it's like start to finish. So as much as we would love to have more adults trained, we really need to continue to look at the capacity through next year and see when we can get Krista and her team members to come in and train more adults. We have trained adults in the community and in the schools about 4 years ago when I first came on board, 5 years ago. We trained probably maybe about 60 community members and staff, but something that we would like to do more of.
I have a question. When we're talking about the parent information night or whatever we called it, is that something that is going to be offered to parents of kids who are entering health class, or how is that going to be? How does that going to work? Yeah,
we'll open it up to anybody that would like to come to learn more about it, but obviously the target audience will be our current 9th grade parents. We also have the opportunity to possibly train some of our current 10th graders based off of the grouping that might be in the 10th grade class. We might have some grade span within that class. We might have some 11th graders sprinkled into that class. So it'll be open to anybody. We're also going to do a in-person, and we're going to do a virtual training. We're going to do 2 separate trainings. So we'll have try to open it up so people can either come or in person or do it virtually.
And that's going to be something every year that you're going to offer?
If we continue, if we continue the program, that would be great. We're going to see how the first year goes with this. Thankfully, there's no cost to the district. Am I right? Right, thumbs up. I think we're saving how much are we saving through the grant? Yeah, about $10,000 that this would cost, and we were actually prepared to pay that. But Krista was able to secure a grant through the IU, and that's going to be free of charge for the district.
Okay, and also regarding that little check-in card that you put at the end, you talked about how students talk to other kids and don't necessarily talk to their parents or a trusted adult. Is there going to be a portion of this where a kid can talk about a concern about a friend without having their identity revealed, like Safe to Say is like anonymous, like that type of thing?
Yeah, we'll have plenty of opportunity. We have systems in place like that already, but we can remind the students that are part of that there's other options to share information where they want to maybe remain anonymous.
Well, I guess that sounds great. The reason I bring that up is I know that with Safe to Say, there are some kids who think it's a joke to report on somebody or whatever because they can be anonymous. But in this scenario, it seems like, yes, they would be anonymous, but they would also be talking to an adult. There'd be less likelihood for that to be some sort of joke if they were talking to an adult in person instead of just a line or a hotline or whatever.
Yeah, I would agree. And this will be able to have more kind of face-to-face time when needed.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions?
Yeah, question. Sorry if I missed this during the presentation, but is this available only during school hours, or is it available 24 hours?
The course, or?
No, like the first aid, like help that the students could get.
So they capture
if they want to talk to somebody, or
yeah.
Yeah.
So the resources are, so part of the course is the manual will have, each student gets a manual. The back of the manual has national resources. But so many of our students want to actually utilize resources right here close to where they live. So a lot of the resources, depending on their hours, are those emergency crisis. And then you have those resources like a warm line that's not for a crisis, but you want to talk to somebody like a certified peer specialist, been through a similar lived experience, where those have certain hours. So that's all included, and we go through that each week. So I don't get an entire wall of resources on the Padlet and say, here you go. Each week we build it together. So at the end of the session, we say, we just talked about how to stay mentally well. We talk about good mental health habits and things like that. And we show them as we go. We added these 3 or 4 resources. But they would have access to that. Yeah, it's the Padlet's 20, like wherever you guys decide to house the Padlet, they would have access to that link.
Okay. Yeah, just being through mental health crisis emergencies, personally, it's really difficult to get like a response that's appropriate, when you're after hours. So, in Chester County, even the Chester County Mental Health Awareness Unit, they're not 24/7 either. So, after hours, you're really stuck with 911 and heading to the police. And the police are great at doing some things, but they're really not great just in their physical presence at de-escalating someone who's in a mental health crisis. And I think that's something we need to work at as a community. Just that piece is really missing, and it's really critical.
Sure.
I think
There have
for
been many
people.
police departments that have been trained more recently, so they are reaching out to get in that youth training that we had talked about. So that's encouraging too, so they can start to learn the language and talk about those de-escalation skills. The other thing to think about too is every week we're going in, we're making behavioral observation. We're keeping data every single day, every time we have that session. So we're starting to see trends. And as we start to see trends, we start to see the same student marking sad, we're going to be reaching out to counselors and let them know this is what we're seeing. So we're hoping to prevent more of those type of situations because kids are really honest on those exit tickets. They're really sharing and getting the help they need. So it's been very encouraging, the data so far from us here in Chester County. And we've been doing this for a couple of years now.
That's great.
Very
That's great.
positive.
And I encourage you too to also make sure you see the path like through all the way, because sometimes you start looking for these resources and you're inundated with 20 different things to like try, but so many of them turn out to be dead ends. Like they only get you so far. So it's which makes it frustrating, especially when you're in crisis.
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
Just looking for some confirmation. I imagine that the faculty that are trained to participate in this program, there's a time commitment for their involvement. Has that time already been accounted for in their day-to-day already workload?
Thankfully, we had an opportunity on April 21st. Dr. Soder built into the schedule, in collaboration with me, time for the folks that got trained, our staff members during that time. So we were able to build that in. What's nice about the model that we developed, which I think is a pretty good one, that our health and PE teachers will be in the room. So it's although it's not co-teaching because the facilitators are going to be running and are trained, but they will be there to support. They know the students the best. They have relationships with students. So we kind of get the best of both worlds, the connection to the students and then also the connection to the mental health supports.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We're moving on to Curriculum and Special Education Committee. Mrs. Sabo is not here. Mrs. DiMarino?
Yes, we have 2 items on our agenda. First is a STEAM update. The full board got to see the STEAM in action, and that was a fun day for us. But now we want an update on how that program is going. So take it away.
So actually, we're going to be inviting our team up here along with Dr. Lehman, and while they are doing their presentation, I do have a gift for each of you. I'll be giving you one of those nice black shirts.
Oh, that's right.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity to provide the update to you on our STEAM program. We're very proud of the program, but before we begin, I want to remind you of our visual. If you imagine the visual of our tree, And you will probably not look at another tree the same way after tonight. I want to remind you that we now have a K through 12 STEAM program. So what we've had a trunk and we've had the branches. So our trunk of the tree represents our middle school program. And we have exploring technology, applied technology, we have art classes, we have science classes, math classes, and all children go through the same courses. In the branches of our tree, which makes the beautiful crown and shapes the beauty of the tree, is our high school programs. And kids have the possibility to select different areas. They can go into engineering, they can go into CAD, they can go into the sciences, into mathematics, into the arts. So that tree, the branches, represents the crown. And what we've never had before are the roots of the tree. And if you know, the roots of a tree not only provide nourishment to the tree, but it anchors the tree. And a fact about roots is that it provides nourishment to the tree for the life of the tree. So standing before us, we have the roots of our tree. We have invested in these 5 teachers who were master teachers in their grade levels, in their content. They're master teachers in science, mathematics, ELA, and social studies. So we didn't purchase a program. These individuals have created a program for ONJ Roberts. So I'd like to introduce them to you. I'm just going to go alphabetically because that's the way I practiced it. Okay, from East Coventry, we have Mallory Grove. From East Vincent, we have Carrie Matan. From French Creek, we have Matt Brewer. From North Coventry, we have Eric Smith. And from West Vincent, we have Liz O'Mara. So without further delay, they will share with you our update. So thank you for your time.
So I guess nothing like a good dad joke turned into a cartoon to start off the presentation. Anyway, the goal of tonight's presentation is just basically to dive into the world of the elementary STEAM program and to provide you all with an update with where we've been and where we're going with the program.
This is our STEAM video that we have kind of made a culmination of events and kind of highlights throughout the year. We know you guys were able to see some hands-on experiences, but this is a culmination of everything we've done so far. You will have an opportunity to view the video if you are a stakeholder in the community and not able to view it tonight. So looking at our agenda, we're going to discuss program development and alignment, program design, looking ahead, how we built the program, and then we have an opportunity for feedback and questions at the end.
So we all have a lot to be proud of just in the past year of what we've done in the STEAM program, just because we haven't had a program to purchase. And we have a lot of people to thank, especially the school board, so thank you for allowing 5 teachers at the elementary level to be able to collaborate on a daily basis, 2 times a day at least, and really just to be able to co-teach together to build a program that we're happy about. And there's a lot of other people as well as Dr. Stout, Dr. Soder, Dr. Lehman, all the administration, the tech department as well, who allows us to be able to figure out what things we can do, where the technology is leading, and the Ed Foundation. They provided numerous grants for us to be able to provide to our students. And with K-12 alignment as well, we are working with those branches, as Dr. Lehman would say, and the trunk, and we are making sure that everything is aligned all the way from the elementary levels to the middle school and high school. So a lot to look forward to, a lot to reflect on, which we're excited to do here as the school year approaches.
So our program is broken up into 3 main ideas: engineering, robotics, and coding and computational thinking. You got to see the robotics component, which is just a small piece. That's for this year what we've done at the end of our STEAM program, and everything builds up to that culmination of that program. So for the future of our program, we're looking ahead for professional development opportunities to plan innovative lessons. Going to different workshops and going to ISTE this summer, we're learning a lot of new things and skills and strategies that we want to bring into our program. We are using our resources here at ONJ Roberts to make connections with both the middle school and the high school and make sure that our students know the things that they can do in the future here at our district.
All of our lessons are aligned to the standards, both the STEELS, which is the new Pennsylvania science standards, similar to the next generation science standards. And what we do in the STEAM class is we really focus on those engineering skills and standards, and then the classroom teachers in their science classes build upon what we do in STEAM class. So it's not just collaborating with the secondary teachers, but also making sure we're in alignment with what they're learning in their grade level classroom. And then we align to the Computer Science Teacher Association standards for our coding and our computations lessons. Hopefully when you came into our STEAM classes, you saw a lot of great things. We were very proud to showcase what we are doing so far. These are the 4 main C's of STEAM. The first one is creativity. We see this a lot in the robotics, coding, and engineering, but really thinking outside of the box when you solve a challenge, not just one path to a solution, but multiple paths, and sharing out those paths with each other to compare and contrast. You should have seen a lot of collaboration and communication among the students. And then most importantly, in my opinion, is the critical thinking aspect, getting them to really think through trade-offs when they're doing different problems, how, if you have a big problem, how can you break it down into smaller chunks? They'll do these things not just in STEAM, but in their other classes, in their careers as well, taking a bigger project and breaking it down, thinking through, I have this idea in my head, how do I make it a reality?
So this is something else that you'll see in every single one of our lessons. This is called the Stanford Design Thinking Process. It's basically just a methodology for creative problem solving. Our students see this process and use this process in virtually every lesson that they go through. We discuss each of these 5 steps as a whole group, and then we send them off on their own to begin working. So the first step in this is to basically build empathy. We want the students to understand that sometimes the problems that they're going to encounter are not always their own problems. So we need to think about the people that these problems impact. Before we design solutions for them, we need to first step into their shoes and think about what's important to them. So the second step is the define step. This is where the specific problem that we want to solve is addressed. Our team strives to develop problems that are not only real world, but also relatable to the students. After we define the problem, we jump into the ideate stage. The focus of this step is just basically idea generation. Through self-reflection, through collaboration, the students come up with a variety of ways to solve the same problem. So it's really not about coming up with the right idea, but generating a whole range of possibilities. After that, they then decide on what they think the best solution would be. They then collaborate with each other and work as a team to bring their ideas to life and to build a small prototype of their solution. So while using tools, technology, and other materials, the students will likely experience some kind of failure, but we assure the students that that's okay. This is also when their original ideas may also morph into brand new ideas. And finally, once their prototype is finished, they have the opportunity to test their prototype. As they test, they may identify different ways to make improvements to their designs, and also have the opportunity to observe how other students went about solving the same problem using the same materials. So since we encourage our students and teach our students about the Stanford Design Thinking process, we decided as a team to use the same process and same methodology when developing our own STEAM program. So when we talked together as a team, and we started with the empathy stage, obviously our goal, the group of people that we're thinking of is our students. So in empathizing with our students, we want our students to realize that challenges and failures typically lead to opportunity.
The interesting part about taking the Stanford design process is that we practice what we teach. So when we built this program, we wanted to make sure that we were also practicing the Stanford design process when we look at our program as a whole. So as Mr. Smith just said, we did the empathize part. So when we look at defining our program, we want to include the OJR motto for greatness today and tomorrow. So our definition was to create a program aligned to STEELS and CSTA standards that align to student success for greatness today and tomorrow.
With the ideation piece, we do a lot of ideation, and we are constantly coming up with different ideas that are going to fit, or we think are going to fit with, align with the curriculum, which is always leading into the prototyping. We are always building and constructing and doing all of the apps that we can to make sure that it's appropriate for our students before we actually put it out there, which goes back to the collaboration piece that we talked about throughout this presentation.
The ultimate testing of our program is what students do, not just inside of the four walls of our STEAM labs, but outside of our STEAM labs. So how are they really applying what we've taught them? How are they utilizing all of the concepts and critical thinking and the key skills we want them to take as they grow as OJR students in the middle school and high school, but also as they take on their careers moving forward?
So as we created our lessons for coding and computation, we really dug into the CSTA standards, and we picked out 4 main skills for coding for our first year. That was sequences, loops, variables, and conditionals. And with those variables, it was nice because we can make the connection to math class in the upper grades with what they're learning in math and how that use of variable is similar to the use of variable storing information in their computer programs. As they learn all 4 of these skills, again, it's that critical thinking piece that we're really focusing on with the kids, taking that thinking to the next level. We'll teach them a skill and then give them time to try it out, create their own things. In the younger grades in K-2, we use a program called Scratch Junior because it is icon-based, picture-based. So we have even kindergartners who are able to code simple programs in Scratch Junior, and it gets more complex as they go up through grade 2. And then in grades 3 and above, we use Scratch, which is word block-based, and it gets a lot more intense with using if-then statements, wait until statements, sensing, those types of skills are involved in it.
Notice that a lot of these circles have a lot of things in common with the previous slide, but ultimately in robotics, we're looking for our kids to problem solve all the way from kindergarten to 6th grade. The kids are driving, building, coding different robots, specifically focusing on Bluebot, which is one of the robots we use in the elementary for K-2. It's more symbol-based, so they're pushing more buttons. They can actually code on an app and program that. And then we're moving into Dash, which is more block-based. Kublets is one that's K-6, which they're using, and the good thing about Kublets is that it's actually screen-free, and they're using a lot of ideas in how to make these Kublets work without actually coding them on an iPad. So again, a lot of different similarities, or a lot of similarities between these areas, but problem solving is really big in robotics, being able to work through those.
When we look at the engineering and design process, our key takeaway is for them to fail forward. We have a really funny lesson where we say, we want you to fail. And the students are jaw dropped, they're gobsmacked, they cannot believe that their teachers are telling them to fail, but we tell them that failure is an opportunity to move forward. It would be very easy if you went through life and everything went the way you hoped, but would you learn all of the things that we want you to learn? So we really emphasize that failing forward, and we encourage them to take risks and to try to move forward from their failures. We also ask them to collaborate with their peers, ideate and iterate their designs, which means change and change again and make the necessary changes to their designs.
So for our engineering and design lessons, we use a few different materials. Right now we have Strawbees, which is that top photo. They are straws and connectors, and you can build endless designs with them. We can also combine those with coding and attach microbits and motors to them and actually make them move as well. So it's combining some of those different ideas. We use 3Ducts, which are sets of cardboard forms and connectors, 3D connectors. Kids love building with those. They can make endless possibilities. And then finally, we'll be pulling in our makerspace next year. So giving our students a challenge, giving them free range with scaffolding to sets of materials and recycled materials, and some wonderful donations we've gotten from the community, and seeing their possibilities and their imagination.
So physical computing and engineering. In this group of lessons, the students had the opportunity to combine and integrate the skills that they've learned from engineering and coding and continue to solve real world problems just up on the next level. So these lessons, they continue to reinforce creative problem solving.
They're really taking the coding that they do on the computer and seeing how that relates to the real world, to the physical world. So you might see this play out with Lego Spike when they create a model amusement park ride that they would like to propose for a local park. Or in Makey Makey, we have them creating a flower that senses the light and closes at nighttime and blooms at daytime. With the microbits, we have them do things like create a hot potato game where they pass the microbit around, and when time is up, whoever's holding it is out of that round. But with all of these things, we're building in those 4 C's again. So even when they're doing the hot potato, it's a collaboration activity, not a competition activity.
We have a lot of future ideas. You can see a lot of them up there on the screen right now. But just knowing where our program has really come from, and knowing that there wasn't a program in place, and just the ability to collaborate, like I've said before, it's given us the time to think about where we're headed as a district. And there's a lot of different ideas that we've explored and a lot of things that we've changed. I think this presentation itself has changed probably in the last week, just of different ideas and technology that is continuing to evolve. But we're excited about a lot of these things, and I can let some of them talk about some of the things that we.
Sure. So we all really get passion projects about these future ideas, and we dive deep into them. One of the ones that I've kind of dove in deep into is CoSpaces, which is a really interesting program. It allows students to code on a computer or an iPad. They can then take their virtual world and put it on a Merge Cube, where it can kind of 3D display for them, or they can take it into VR, where they wear a VR glass and they can kind of see their world inside of them. It also offers collaboration where kids can be working on the same CoSpace or the same world together. And so this is something that would also align K to 6. We could do it very small with younger children, and they can build massive worlds when they go to their upper grades.
Something that we've been focusing a lot on as a team is the design of our classroom. We're in a unique position this year where we see students in grades K through 6. Big span of ages and sizes of our students. So we want to make sure that our classrooms are accessible to all of our students and they're comfortable being there, but also for what we're doing. For robotics, we need cleared open spaces. For engineering, we need spaces to build and tinker. So really looking at the design of our spaces and making sure that it works for our students.
We put Makey Makey up there again because we wanted to make sure to talk to you about the IU's support of our program. They have provided professional development for us, but they've also provided opportunity to borrow from their lending library so that we can test out equipment here at O&J before we decide to invest in it. Makey Makey has been one of those pieces that we've piloted with different classes across the district to see if this is something that would be successful with our students. And we've had some great outcomes with that. Another thing that the IU has helped us with is Sphero Indy. They recently gave us some training on it. It's that little blue car at the bottom. It is coded by color, so you put out color mats, and each color will do a different thing, like turn 45 degrees, turn 90 degrees, and then if they want to turn more than that, they're going to have to think through logically which tiles do they need to combine. So it can be used as simple as kindergarten and as complex as 6th grade. Even the 5 of us, when we went through training and did some of the challenges, it was a great workout for our brains. So we're really excited to explore that more with our students.
So something else is going to be keeping our teams busy is just basically keeping up with the times. So artificial intelligence is basically taking over the world at this point. So we want to make sure that the students understand that, understand how it works and where it's coming from. So I mean, even something as simple as if you're chatting online with Verizon, the customer representative, it's probably going to be a robot that you're talking to. So the students are going to be able to, at one point, create their own program that you can literally talk to and it will talk back to you. So just trying to keep up with the times in terms of artificial intelligence is one of our goals as well. Oh, I forgot. I'm not supposed to say that.
And then finally, if you want to just skip ahead, I think these were hidden slides. There's more information on these slides for you if you have additional time and would like to look through at some of our sample lessons. But this slide shows us our STEAM website that has information more specifically about all the lessons that we have taught this year and where we're headed next year. You can also find our Instagram page on this website. We've been updating throughout the year with highlights of our program. And then we're going to add the video that we weren't able to show you today to that website as well. Anything else, team? All right, Dr. Lehman, it's yours.
Thank you. I want to just highlight or put a huge exclamation point under how hardworking these people are. They've really, they keep me hopping with every day, like, let's go, we got more to do. Checklist, punch list, everything. But I wanted to point a few things out. You've heard the word STEELS, and you've heard the word next generation with STEELS. So just to, like a little commercial to let you know, STEELS is science, technology, engineering, environmental literacy, and sustainability. That's the new science that's coming in Pennsylvania. And we have 3 years to implement this curriculum, but we've laid the backbone already. We've laid the engineering piece backbone so that our grade levels can spiral off of that back. So we're very pleased with how this is being rolled out. Also want to tell you that these teachers know cell phone numbers, first names of Frank and Paul, of Mike Shelgren. They know the painter. They know the carpenter, they know the electrician, the plumber, like they use our district resources when we have a problem. The electrician just recently, he's going to do so much in prototyping for us. So we really appreciate very much the district services that help us to make us grassroots. So do you have any questions for us?
I actually have a quick comment and a question to follow up. That when we visited the classrooms, one of the things that, and I know I'd spoken to you about at West Vincent, one of the things that was so impressive to us was the sheer volume of not only the curriculum that you've developed, but just the deliverables, the pieces that you're using in the classroom, every single thing that is being used in the classroom, whether it's a printout on the floor like the basketball court that we saw, was created by this team. And I appreciate that you're using the Stanford model, and it is purposeful. The work that you're doing and how you're doing it is purposeful. Do you have the opportunity to share those failures with your students? Because I think it's so powerful for kids as they're learning to be scientists and they're learning to move through this process, that they see who they're looking up to, that it doesn't, it isn't immediate for you all as well, that you have to take time, that you didn't come up with, you weren't the first time you ran that, it didn't run correctly, and you had to change it and fix it and work on it. So do you have the opportunity to share your own experiences with the kids and your own failures and challenges?
This year especially, knowing it's new, I mean, there's failures all the time, truthfully, and I'd be lying to say if there weren't. Just in our coding, for example, there's always bugs, and we talk about bugs all the time. It's a real life thing. So it's cool to actually work through these problems and then highlight them at the end. It's a unique position because we're highlighting failures and then we are actually showing how we can fix them. So yes, from an educator standpoint, this has been a year where we have definitely shown a lot of failures in multiple lessons.
One of the key spots that shows up is when we're doing our pilot lessons. We always start off with the kids, okay, you guys are the guinea pigs. You're the first ones in the district to try this, and we need you to help us figure out how we can make this lesson better. Another way is sometimes they will be coding a project and they will create a bug, like Matt said, that is very complex. The more they like to add into their project, the deeper they like to go, the bigger the ripple effect every change they make. And so sometimes I'll have to be like, write your name on a Post-it, describe the problem, and I'm gonna look into this for you for next week. So they're seeing we are also lifelong learners.
I have said to a kid before, I need to call Mrs. Matan. I don't know how to do this. I don't know what you're doing. We got to figure it out, so they know that we're learning along with them, and it's a collaboration between us and our students and us and each other.
I have a quick question. Well, not quick, sorry. When we were there watching, it was really cool to see the kids working in, all together and everything. But, I know that sometimes when you have groups like that or you're collaborating, there's always issues with like group dynamics and things like that. And so there's children that kind of hide and don't participate, or who allow someone else to do all the thinking, and that kind of thing is constant. So I'm wondering how you evaluate them on an individual basis, so whether or not these critical thinking skills are really there, or if it's just the group was able to solve a task or solve a problem.
Yeah, that's a great question. Groupthink is something that can definitely overtake a small group and not let everyone have a voice. We have a STEAM mantra: they stay positive, then they take risks, and that's a huge part of this, is them taking risks in a way that feels safe to them. We offer something called Tinker Time in the beginning of our lessons, where they use different materials that they might be familiar with, Magna-Tiles, Lego. We use that idea of something that they have used before, and we bring it into our classroom so they feel hopefully less nervous to take that risk if it's something familiar with them. Specifically talking about the groups and how we group our students, there's a lot of research that shows that students in different groupings have different results. So technically like 2 boys, 2 girls, that will allow more voices. 1 boy, 3 girls. The way we group the students allows us to kind of individualize students' needs. So if we have somebody that we know might not have the largest voice in STEAM yet, we're going to try to grow that. We might put them in a group where we feel like they're in a dynamic that they might be able to speak up and take that risk with their group.
Is there any formal evaluation of students or anything like that to see where individuals are? Or is it just?
Yeah, so this year is really kind of neutralizing the playing field. So we have students coming from all different classrooms. Maybe they have a teacher that really takes risks in STEAM, and maybe they have a teacher who is less hesitant to take those risks. Our job this year is to show students an equal playing field of each grade. So you're here now, you're able to kind of work with us, we're able to kind of get you the skills that we want you to have moving forward in the program. So there isn't a ton of formal evaluation at the moment, but we do look at our standards and we want to make sure that they are taking risks, collaborating with peers, and that they are meeting the standards we have so far. Moving forward, there will be way more individualization and assessment when we feel like they all have that same baseline moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
I had 2 kind of related questions. I'm sure it's mainly anecdotal at this point, but are students seeing a lot of cross-curricular connections as they're moving into their other subject areas outside of their experience with you?
Yeah, so we include literacy in our lessons, and we make sure we have read alouds and opportunities for students to kind of solve real world problems with math problems and other things like that. But when you're asking about, are they able to apply it in their own classroom? Moving forward, we know we are adopting the engineering standards, and with that adoption, we want more opportunities to go into teachers' classrooms and kind of co-teach with them, take this co-teaching model we luckily have had this year, thanks to you guys, and kind of help foster more of that engineering and what we're doing in our room and taking it into a teacher's room and applying it there.
And the Stanford Design Model, that's a problem-solving model that you can use in kind of any dimension in life. Have any kids said to you, you know, I went home and I had this challenge with my younger brother, and I applied what we learned in class today.
Yeah, we often get those artifact presents where they come in and they say, look what we made when we went home. So they might not necessarily say, I used design thinking with this with my brother, but they come in and they show us what they made and they bring that energy back in to our room, which is really cool to see.
Nice.
Since you mentioned the home aspect of it, as we see technology proliferate more and more, like we saw a challenge where not all students had access to PCs, so that's where the genesis of the laptop program. Do we see any future plans for taking the STEAM lessons and moving them into the home as like a reinforcement or anything like that?
Okay, I think I need to move further away from the podium. That's a great question. I think COVID really made us bring technology into the hands of students. When we look at STEAM and we want to bring it into students' lives, right now they're using Scratch in our program, and that's a login card that's completely free. So Scratch is created by MIT. They're pretty amazing, and they gave us it for free. They give everyone it for free. So they're able to take their projects home and work on them. But you are correct, there is a digital sense where if a student doesn't have access to a device at home, our district does a great job of providing them, but if they might not have internet access or other things like that, there is that opportunity where they might not be able to log into Scratch, but Scratch is something we're doing this year that they're able to utilize at home with a quick login.
I would like to add also on the last slide where you see the bit.ly, the link to the page, there are activities there. It lists what all the lessons are, but there are additionally lessons that kids could do from home. If you like this lesson, you can dive deeper in here. So it's that connection as well.
Real quick to touch on your question, Mr. Chester. The nice thing about engineering is bringing in our maker space, it's all recyclable materials. Paper towel rolls, we don't use toilet paper rolls, but we cut them smaller for those reasons. But students have those at home. You know, you have a box of cereal, you have a can. They can create anything out of that. So having that idea in our classroom that then anyone can access at home, a cardboard box. Our 3 Ducks materials that we used were actually created by 2 kids who loved playing with cardboard boxes. And we talk about in the beginning, you know, we have connections and who likes doing that. So all of our kids have some way to do STEAM at home.
Awesome, thank you.
The other at-home connection too I wanted to bring up is every single one of our lessons, we have a career connection. So if they're sitting down at a dinner table, mom and dad might ask, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? We always introduce some kind of career that they can do with the skill that they learn that day. So it kind of gives them a talking point, gives them something to think about after a lesson is complete.
Excellent. Is there somewhere I can order the things for science?
Order them?
Yeah.
He wants the toys.
The toilet paper?
Toys? Oh, yeah.
I wasn't going to
Paper
call them
towel
toys,
tubes.
but hey,
Amazon's been our best friend. Yeah.
strictly for science purposes, though. Thank you again.
I'd just like to thank all of you for the presentation today and your enthusiasm. If you guys are bringing this energy to the board meeting, I can't believe the amount of energy you're bringing to classrooms. Like, I feel if like the Disney Channel made a series about super STEAM teachers, like this is it. So just keep up the great work, and I really appreciate everything you're doing.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Now we're going to move on to textbooks for consideration. So Dr. Soder.
So 3 weeks ago, as well as last week, I put information in Boardline for you for the two texts that are going to be moving forward, in keeping with the request from or for our committee to not bring them and not necessarily discuss them, but answer questions. So as I say, you have the information that we shared with the why we chose the textbooks that we did, and we'll be moving these on to the May agenda unless anybody has any questions. And I did bring them if you wish to see them.
Does the committee actually need to vote to bring them forward to the full board? We do not.
Our policy is just that they need to be voted on, so we just put
Okay.
them on there.
Okay, any questions about the textbooks? Okay, we're good. That's it for curriculum.
Thank you, Mrs. DiMarino. We are moving on to Finance, Building, and Grounds Committee. Mr. Harmanos.
Thank you, Mrs. Peterson. Okay, agenda item 4.01. We've got our updated OJR infographic with budget fast facts. Are we going to present that at all? Or?
No, we've had that out for a while now. We're just bringing it to everyone's attention. It's just another place that they can receive information about the budget.
And then in the executive content, you also have a list of the neighborhood school districts in Chester County and their tax increases and where we stand amongst them. So we're less than the average, it looks like.
And I can actually, Mr. Cicito, would you mind, or Dr. Cicito, would you mind, we can show that as well. And I just want to make sure everybody's aware, these are the actual proposed budgets that have been approved by our neighboring school districts in Chester County, that their PDE 2028 has actually been board approved in the proposed budget. So there are several schools that have not done that step yet, so they're not included.
Okay, moving on. We've got agenda item 4.02, an update on the master planning with the Schrader Group.
Thank you. My name is Danielle Hoffer with the Schrader Group. I'm joined tonight by Jillian Craiglow. She was actively involved in the LGI and the auditorium and the library renovations, and so we're looking forward to the demolition starting in mid-June. And I apologize if you're going to be displaced for a little while for your board meetings, but we're looking forward to the transformation. I'm also joined by Mark Karowski from K&W Engineer, who will be my co-presenter tonight, talking about the site planning. So I want to go over the scope of work that is part of this master planning process. And what we're here to talk to you tonight is the data collection portion of it. We need to do that, and that consists of the programming, the preliminary zoning analysis, and the elementary school campuses. We have some information on that. But we really need to go through this exercise in order for us to do concept planning as well as cost estimates, which are ultimately part of the direction in going through the scope of work. Next slide. You may remember this chart that was presented at the conclusion of the 2019 feasibility study, which identified several projects on this campus as well as in the district. And we quickly realized that you can't just break them down into individual silos. We really need to look at this campus especially collectively, because there's multiple considerations on the campus, on this building, on the middle school building, potentially looking at the district administration building, as well as look at campus planning. And Mark is going to talk to you about some developments associated with that. We know we have an impervious coverage issue from a zoning perspective, which is going to hinder us to a certain extent of what we can do on the campus. So we really needed to look at everything. So we started with the programming. So we we kicked off the project in the end of March and met with the administration to talk in general about the various projects as well as touring the buildings on this campus. And we'll talk to you tonight about the high school, some programming aspects with that, the middle school, the district administration building. So we'll start with athletics. I don't know if you're familiar with a plan that was done in 2007, which added an athletic wing onto your facility here that was actually went through the land development process and it was approved, but when the bids came in as an alternate, it was not accepted by that particular board. I'm going to show you a plan of what that looked like, but we met with your athletic department the end of April to actually go through all the spaces and talk about what their current needs are. So that may have changed from what happened in 2019 till today. You have a very vibrant athletic program, so we wanted to take a look at the spaces and what that meant. And then we actually looked at it in comparison to what was actually designed back in 2007, and it is quite different. So they identified that the available spaces in your current program do not meet your current athletic requirements. Just, first of all, just not enough teaching stations. The main gym, you may be familiar with that it's really not adequately sized for competitions and doesn't have adequate seating capacity in that facility. There are inadequate locker room and tea rooms available. We also have some rooms down in the basement with no ADA accessibility, which we'd like to eliminate that if we could. And then you are currently using some classroom space just to get some additional teaching spaces for your athletic department, for your physical education department. So if those were converted back to classrooms, it gains additional capacity for your high school. So this is a plan, a little hard to see. On the right-hand side is your overall footprint of the high school. And in the areas of red are the areas that we're considering. So on the top left-hand corner is that design that I talked about in 2017, which is blown up on the left-hand side. And you can see they did some locker rooms, some team rooms, and they did a 2 teaching station gym with no seating capacity in there. And as we went through the program with the athletic department, there are additional spaces that they actually need to support the program. And then the little box on just to the right of that on the enlarged plan is the classroom space that's currently being used for some some physical education programs that would be great to convert back to classroom space. And then, of course, on the bottom left-hand corner is your athletics wing, and in the big box is your performing arts wing, which houses your auditorium and the music classrooms around the perimeter. The performing arts end, the beginning of May, we met with your high school music department. Started with the auditorium. Currently, your auditorium seats just over 1,000. They would like more seating capacity. We talked about the pros and cons with that. They talked about the stage not being large enough. They asked for an orchestra pit, and we talked to them about some other options. In the age of technology these days, there's different ways instead of actually building an orchestra pit that you can have an orchestra in another room and then be televised, have the performance be televised into the room. This is something that was done during COVID, and so with technology, you can do a lot of things. As you may know, the auditorium has poor acoustics, so that would be something that would need to be rectified. The music rooms, an interesting point that they made there is just how it's oriented, and you kind of weave around some corridors to get to some of the rooms. There's some hiding spaces in there. It appears that the original, what is currently the choral room, which is a tiered space, used to be the band room. And so they added an addition for band and then converted the former band room into a choral room. Now, that program has been so successful that the enrollments have just taken off. The orchestra program was very small and has doubled in capacity. So their space is too small. The choral is about 100 students now, and the band could double the size of their space if they had their druthers. Something you'll hear when I talk about the middle school as well as the high school is that they're constantly in storage needs. He said that the instrument storage room could be 3 times the size it is now. So as you start to think about these things, you're talking about adding additional real estate just to house the programs associated with the high school. We did meet with the district administration the end of March. We talked about the current administration building, as you know, doesn't have any handicapped accessibility from the first floor to the lower level, to the upper level. So that's an issue. The administration is split to the campus, the building on campus, as well as the Warwick building, houses some of the additional administration services. And there's the facilities department and warehousing that's in the district service center. So talked about, and the district would like us to consider maybe consolidating those programs on the campus somehow, so that's something that we're going to look at as well. On the middle school side, when we walked the campus on March 29th, we looked at the cafeteria. It is currently really tight in terms of your seating capacity there, so the request has been to expand that cafeteria. In the bottom left-hand corner is a wall that is shown on the exterior on the top left-hand corner picture. One of the things when we talk about impervious area, meaning that it's, like pavement and those types of things, if we can expand out and not take any green space on the campus, that would be most desirable. So we looked at the structure there to see whether or not we could expand that. So that's one of the options that we'll take a look at. On the performing arts side, we just had a meeting today to meet with the music department at the middle school. And although the space was nicely renovated most recently, it, again, with the programs that have just increased in size, the auditorium and the stage, they've said is too small. The stage is currently being used for the orchestra program. They do not have a dedicated space for orchestra. And so they barely fit the musical on the stage, and ensembles are also on the stage. And when you get percussions and you get all the different instruments on the stage there, it almost becomes a safety issue. So there's some concerns there. As far as the band room is concerned, he said that the band room was too small. Again, they have storage needs. Here's the good news. The choral room said her room is fine. So I don't want to be all downtown Debbie Downer here, but she did say that her space is adequately sized for her program, and she thinks it is adequately sized for any future growth. But the orchestra doesn't have a dedicated space, so they gave some ideas of what they thought could do as far as programming, and gave a list of priorities as part of their programming. I'm going to turn it over to Mark, and he's going to talk a little bit about some of the site planning issues that he's uncovered as far as his data collection is concerned.
Good evening. I'm Mark Karowski. I'm with K&W. Just kind of set the stage. Our role, our firm is basically everything outside the walls. So we are civil engineers, landscape architects, land planners, surveyors, and geotechnical folks. A couple of things that Danny mentioned. So let's talk zoning first on the secondary campus. So, and some of you may be aware of this, right now the current campus is essentially maxed out. It's actually, I think, just a shade over the allowable impervious cover. That harkens back to that 2007 project. There was a lot of conversation at that time. So we're going to have to be a little creative when we think about how to extend buildings, how to work with parking, how to address parking traffic circulation. We've got some thoughts around that. I mean, there is pervious pavement we can use. Maybe we can convert some existing paving to pervious pavement, which actually could be considered potentially as not impervious in the sense of a zoning requirement. There is always the potential to seek zoning relief through, an appeal to the zoning hearing board, which in this case would be a variance, or not to get too far over our skis, but there could be a conversation with the township if they'd be agreeable to even a zoning amendment. I mean, the use here is clearly a school use within it's the MU zone or the mixed use zone, or an established use here. That may be something to consider. But all of which is to say, we're going to have to be a little creative, and we've started to come up with some thoughts on how we might be able to do that and still support the things that come out of the programming conversation with building additions, et cetera. Talking about planning, so I'll reference, we were actually part of the team back in 2019 that was doing some of the previous study, and we did quite a few evaluations on the secondary campus trying to figure out, and we didn't find the magic bullet for, bus stacking, separation of parent and bus drop off. How do we park appropriately? How do we, keep people and vehicles separated from each other? And certainly we have to look at that again as we start talking about maybe parking expansions and building use. One thing I will say, and this actually came up in the STEAM presentation, which by the way, as an engineer, I was super giddy hearing about all of that. We're going to start hiring some of your kids out of O&J before too long. And that is, how do we, geez, I got all giddy and I lost my train of thought about that one. So as we plan through that and start to figure out, like, how do we get people in and out of campus? How do we look at, like, at Route 23, the driveway? I know we've got some concerns there with circulation and how we get folks in and out of campus, but also within the campus itself. How do we make those, that circulation work? COVID, that's what I was going to say. COVID certainly has changed a lot in how, I'm preaching to the choir, pickup and drop off has become. So we want to revisit some of the concepts that we had shared at that time, which were vetted quite deeply, but world's different now. So we'll certainly be having that discussion with the administration and the team to try and come up with, hey, what has changed in versus what we looked at a few years back. Next slide. So talking about the y'all referred to as the Kutz property, and this I think is geared more towards athletics on the north side of Cadmus. We understand there's some deed restrictions there, which really does limit it to athletic facility type uses. Certainly could lend itself to, the improvements that we're seeing bullet listed here as kind of some of the desired facilities that the district would like to look at. Makes a lot of sense. I will reference, we actually, Jackie and Mike and I went and met with the township just to start getting a little feel for the impervious cover conversation. And one of the thoughts that we tried to brainstorm was, hey, what if we do like a lot consolidation plan and join all that nice green space that's on the other side of Cadmus with campus? Look at that, no more impervious problem. That one kind of hit a wall. We may revisit that discussion, but I think solicitors have weighed in enough to say that's probably not going to happen, which then says, okay, now we've got this nice expansive property of green space on the north side. What can we do, in looking at and some appropriate athletic facilities there? And how do we get kids to and from? I mean, it's just down the bottom and kind of away from campus a little bit, but lots of opportunities there. Moving on, super fun to talk about sewage. Next slide. So, as you again may be aware, so currently the campus is treated by an on-campus, on-lot sewage facility system. In the conversations we had with the township about impervious cover, we were chatting through a little bit about that, and it sounded like there was an opportunity at this point in time to go ahead and seek what I've described here. The first step is sewage facilities planning. That would be to allow the district to connect to public sewer and essentially, hopefully, abandon the on-site treatment plant. We are in the early step of that process right now, which this is really a paperwork exercise. It's planning that goes through first South Coventry Township and then ultimately goes to DEP. That was just submitted on April the 20th. We're waiting some response from the township at this point, but we'll have more information to share. A big chunk of that will be, what are the tapping fees associated with taking the district and now putting it onto public sewer? Certainly eliminates a lot of, I'm sure Mike would speak to this, O&M responsibilities associated with that on-lot treatment system, and takes a lot of those things out of your hair and out of your budget going down in the future. So we'll update you on sewage facilities as we get more information. I would expect within the next month or two, we've reached out again to the township to just get their feedback. Once they come back to us with their paperwork, we go into DEP. Usually takes them about 20 days maybe to get us a response saying, hey, you're approved, or we need a little bit more information. So we should hear something shortly on that. Next slide, and I won't take too much time on this, just kind of revisiting. I know we also wanted to talk a little bit about French Creek and West Vincent, both in terms of site and building stuff. I'll just talk about site because I'm way out of my depth if I start talking about building program things. If we can look at the next slide. So again, this is revisiting some concepts that we discussed with the district a few years back. I won't get into too much detail, same as I mentioned with the secondary campus. We want to revisit, hey, do we have the same challenges on, let's say at French Creek as we did 4 years ago, pre-COVID. But at the time, what we were evaluating was, hey, there's a drop-off area, I believe, at the kind of planned south side of the building. We looked to close that off and very intentionally separate the bus traffic on the right side of the plan, so kind of the high side of the building, and then parent drop-off on the left. So what you'd see there is buses would come in on the top, they'd actually go almost through a cul-de-sac at the end to loop back around and then stage and queue on the top side of the building. And then on the left side, you would have parents coming in completely separate from buses to a staging area then on the planned left side of the building. Yeah, fairly clean. There's a decent amount of work. It does increase parking as well, which I know was at that time was a consideration, and brings that parking more proximate to the building. So things to consider. We're going to dig in a little bit deeper with that one with the administration. Dana, if you want to talk about building things, yeah, sure.
Yeah, one more piece of data collection that we still need to do is we need to confirm some of the space needs at French Creek. With your special programs and the number of students in those programs, we need to see whether or not do a capacity analysis, see if it's warranted to do any additions onto that building. The other consideration for this particular facility is looking at the heating system. Currently, you're heating the building with fuel oil, and there is a bridge over French Creek that is of concern, transversing over that bridge. So possibly looking at some other alternatives with your heating systems, since the boilers are getting old and aging. So another piece that we need to look at.
And then just the next slide, again, this was a different concept. This was not the favored son. This was if we actually, instead of having the two driveways as both in and out, we actually moved all the traffic to the plan left driveway. So buses would come in, but would then actually circulate clockwise around the perimeter and still come around to the top side to drop off. We would also have parents coming in that way and peeling off into that new parent drop-off area to the plan left of the building. So that one takes up a little more green space. We know we've got, you can probably barely see the hatch there on the left side of the property. There's a septic field that we need to be mindful of. So not so sure this one, it's a bit more of a traffic conversation. I hate to see us lose that much green space, so we'd have to dig in a little deeper there. And then to go forward and just take a quick look at West Vincent. So this one, as we understood, again, at that time, I think the primary, sorry, I shouldn't even jump right in here. So as everybody oriented, we've got the road across the top, we get the main entrance coming. I figured you all were very familiar with it. So as you come in off of Conestoga and you come in as that road bears to your left while you're entering the site, there was, I believe, a lot of congestion with buses and parents as you're trying to get kind of up to the top in the drop-off area. So we were trying to find, there's a lot of grade out there. Anybody who's driven it or been on site, there's a lot of grade to work with, makes it a little tricky. This option looked at, well, hey, let's keep everybody doing that, coming in and bearing to the left. But we actually looked to add a third lane where we could dedicate like a right turn in for the parent drop off, which gives quite a bit, a long stacking lane that we could have a lot of cars stacked in there, and separately, essentially a through lane for buses. So then they could get to the upper level to do the bus drop off. Provided a little bit of extra parking down at the bottom. Not ideal. That was kind of, I think, intended maybe for maybe staff. Not a lot of room to pick up more parking out here. So that was one we thought could actually be a relatively inexpensive approach because it's not taking up much real estate. And then the second option on the next slide looks at, hey, what if we totally split it again? Let's say buses come in and they peel off to the right, and we would bring them around entirely on their own with a new drive, bring them up to the top, have them circulate, and then go right back out that same path, which is on the plan left. Then you'd have parents coming in on the right-hand side here of the plan and keeping them intentionally separate. It certainly does achieve that. I think you've got a little bit more work to do there from a construction and cost standpoint. But that's where we are at this point, kind of bringing forward some of the old thoughts, starting to vet those a little bit more in today's world, especially relative to traffic circulation, but we'll keep pressing. Thank you.
So that was the data collection portion of it. The next steps are actually looking at some concept plans, some generating some ideas that we'll vet through the administration, and hopefully next month we'll have some of those ideas to bring forth to you. Ultimately what we want to do is get these priced out with cost estimates, so you can kind of and then identify how this could actually broken up into a series of projects, and over the next several years to implement. Any questions? Okay, good.
Thank you very much. Good job.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Well, I'd like to see some traffic circles in the future.
I knew you were going to say that.
I'm a big advocate of that. Okay, finally, on FB and GC, today we have item 4.03, the 2023-2024 contract addendum from G&L Transportation. Jackie?
Yep. Happy to provide you a summary. We've been working on this back and forth for a little bit now. We did receive a proposal from G&L, and I did share all the backup information with you in the document. This is substantially less than where it started, but it is still a very good proposal for the drivers. So it increases the driver's starting rate as well as existing driver rates, working towards retention on that end. We would like to move the proposal forward. And just to make sure everybody's clear, that translates to an increase in the daily rate for the cost of a school bus. So you can see that costed out on the bottom of that worksheet for the driver's wages. And we would like to bring this forward for the board's consideration at the May board meeting. And we would like for those driver pay rates to be adjusted for the May of this current school year. As you know, we shared that there are significant savings in the current year budget because we are short, I want to say we're short about 11 or 12 permanent drivers this year and 7 substitute drivers. So we have significant savings that we can put towards increasing and making those rates effective May 1st, or the beginning of May, I guess we should say. Through then the end of the 23-24 school year. And then the contract would then increase as it does currently in the existing contract, which I think our contract with G&L expires 24-25, June of 25. So does anybody have any questions about that?
What's the total impact on the budget of these increases?
The total impact is about $350,000 per year. If we bring it forward to May, it's about a $40,000 impact on the current year budget. But like we said, we have close to $300,000 in savings from the current year that we anticipate reserving at the end of this year to apply towards next year's increase, if that's making sense.
Okay, so then the impact of the operating budget that we've put together so far is minimal?
Correct. It'll be minimal because we will be able to use the current year savings to fund the 23-24 impact. Now, the projections for 24-25 moving forward, I will adjust those for you, assuming that the board that this moves forward, if that makes sense.
Right, and given the current state of busing here at Owen J. Roberts, I think that this is something that we need to do, otherwise we're going to be moving in the wrong direction. I don't know if anybody has any additional comments.
Yeah, just so the question is asked and answered, does this make us more competitive with surrounding districts?
Yes, absolutely. Just to be clear about what that does to the starting driver pay rate, our starting driver pay rates, when we adjusted them last year, we were kind of at the top. Now, since it's been a year, we're kind of down at the bottom again, bottom to mid. So the average driver pay rate, starting rates are $24, $25 an hour. So this would move O&J to $25 an hour and offer existing drivers that have, years of experience driving with a higher pay rate than that.
And are there still sign-up bonuses?
Right, well, they will still implement the sign-up bonuses. The GNL already does some retention bonuses, but we're talking in detail with them about that. And then I wanted to bring to your attention, because we do have draft on the contract addendum, we are talking about improving the bus fleet. Because as you know, we have some aging buses, and GNL has agreed to, first of all, I'll step back. They are picking up 50% of the driver wage increase. GNL is picking up 50%, O&J is picking up 50%. They have also committed, and I'm going to add this to the contract addendum, because during COVID, they really did not add any new buses to their fleet or replace any buses. We have some older buses, 2011 and 12s, that they do have issues with. We hear it on the radio all the time. So this June, they will be replacing, I want to say 14 of those, and then in the following year, 22. So not with brand new, it'll either be new or newer used, if that makes sense, 2017 and above.
And just for clarification's sake,
Yes.
the GNL owns the buses?
GNL owns the buses.
We don't own the buses.
We don't own the buses, thank goodness. And they will be replacing as part of their contract.
I have a different question. We had talked at a previous meeting about the fact that with our contract with GNL, we don't have the ability to have any kind of like, I don't know what you call it, but penalty for them not being able to provide service for us. Aside from, I guess, not paying for the bus's use that day. So with this new proposal, if we are proposing that, I'm assuming this is sort of like an alteration of our contract with them, is it something we would want to consider to have language like that, so that if they cannot furnish drivers, that we not only don't have to pay for that bus, but there'd be some other additional thing, maybe that would, I know they can't get blood from a stone, but it'd be nice to be able to motivate, them to be getting drivers for us in some way.
I mean, we could certainly go back and talk about it. I do know that we're not the only school in this situation. And oftentimes when there are, and I will say this based on the existing contracts throughout the county, if there's a penalty clause for that, there's also a clause that happened during COVID on the school district, that you still have to pay a minimum daily rate even if you don't use all of the buses. You have to guarantee the number of buses you're going to use. So we did not get caught with that, because we don't have either. Usually it's one comes with the other. We don't have either. So therefore, we saved a significant amount of money during COVID on transportation.
If we have a bus that doesn't run, we don't pay that daily rate.
Correct, we do not. And that's what I'm talking
And
about, a
that's when we
minimum
have this-
charge,
right.
For example, we don't have 12 buses running, and that's how we're saving those dollars this year. So, but I will say this, we have 2 more years on this contract, and we are modifying it to make it, I mean, we appreciate our drivers. I can't even say enough how much our drivers go out of their way to help each other. We see it every day. They're trying to help each other out and consolidating runs. I just lost my train of thought on that one. Oh, our contract's is expiring in June of '25, and we have made it very clear that we will be going out to bid on that contract, so that we are making sure we get all of the categories and competitive pricing. I mean, GNL may win that bid, but we just want to make sure that we're also obtaining pricing on different aspects of transportation. For example, we have special education transportation, we have private school transportation, we have our home to school, athletics, activities. So having one company used to be preferable, because they were able to hire all of the drivers and provide all the services. We're looking now at potentially having different alternates in the bid, so that we can maybe use more than one bus company. You should know that we did approach CMD, and they fill in. They're currently Pottsgrove and Pottstown's bus contractor, and they help us out with athletics, and they're amazing, and they are there every time that we need them. But they told us they do not have the capacity to take on, for example, all of OJR athletics and be the primary contractor. But they will be there to assist whatever we need. So we do have a supplemental contract with them right now.
Is that a new contract, or?
No, we've had that really during COVID, post-COVID.
Have we been able to utilize that, so we're not sending athletes to contests way too early, or?
Sometimes, not all of the time. we're hoping that the incentives that we, by increasing the driver rate and keeping the retention and new driver incentive bonuses in place, we're going to be able to have more drivers. And we're starting out the gate strong for this current year, which is what we really need to do.
Is there a pool of applicants that they know that we have the potential to fill the gaps where it's needed?
I will say there is a driver shortage statewide, nationally.
So my thing is, like, do the rates, if it's a driver shortage, is it really the rates that's going to make the difference, or is it just these jobs can't get filled?
I would say that there is a pool of drivers that we're all competing for the same drivers. So what we see happening is they will go from one lot to another based on the rate. So if you're out the gate early with competitive rates, they will then be they move over from lot to lot. Mm-hmm. And then the incentive bonus, because when you offer an incentive bonus, they're committing to a certain period of time in order to get all of that bonus. So I'm not saying there are a ton of new CDL drivers out there. Mm-hmm. It's being competitive out the gate. And they don't, for the same pool.
They don't lock their drivers into a contract. They're free to
come
and go.
No. Mm-mm.
One of the other things I was just wondering about was the routes, the design of the bus routes. One of the things that I think we heard at the town halls was there could be 5 kids on a bus for 45 minutes to get to school when they live like right down the street. So like, I don't know how this plays into really the driver shortage, but I mean, it sounds to me as if we need to be a little bit more thoughtful, or there needs to be a more efficient way to bus the students to the schools.
I would agree. And Dr. Stout and I had talked about this in the past. We didn't do it this year because some of our surrounding schools, they weren't successful when they tried to do this. But you could do an opt-out for parents who want to drive. They would just need to commit to it. And sometimes what we've seen in the past is if the weather's bad, or you know what I mean, sometimes they want to ride the bus and sometimes they don't. So therefore, then we need to have the route in place. But we could, if the board would like us to, seriously look into doing some type of a parental opt-out, which then we could consolidate. But we wouldn't be able, just so you know, we wouldn't be able to mid-year say, okay, we have a bus for you. We didn't at the beginning of the year, but now we do. That would be almost impossible. So there's some things that we're considering, and we'll bring them all to you before we even begin to do the routing.
One of the things, and you're right on, Dan, I mean, there's a shortage of CDL drivers, but one of the state is really trying to push to lessen the requirements for the CDL certification. For example, you need to pass the mechanical part, so you need to know things about the engine. To me personally, I just want someone that can drive the bus, that knows how to do it. I really don't care if they know about a diesel engine and how to fix it if it breaks down, because you have mechanics that do that. But that is part of the training right now, that you're required to do that. So they are looking at trying to make some modifications to be reasonable so that we can get folks that desire to do it.
This whole bus thing has obviously been frustrating on many levels for years and for other reasons as well. But one thing that's always tough for a school board and anybody is to see, bus shortages and difficulty with drivers, but then yet see those lines of cars of parents who drop their kids off. And, so we're dealing with the problem of the campus traffic and the problem of not having buses at the same time, and they totally don't agree. And so it's challenging. So I don't know what the rest of the board thinks, but I think that whole parent opt-out might be something we want to look into a little bit more, because it just seems so wasteful to be creating this traffic problem on campus and at the same time struggling to have kids' buses to ride. So maybe that's something we need to talk about in more detail and see if there's a solution. And I mean, I know that might be a difficult thing for parents to get used to, the fact that if you opt out of the bus, you don't have it for the whole year. That might be very difficult, but I don't know, just something I think we should talk about. Anyone agree with that?
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. The other thing that we should look at too, and it came in with some of the recommendations from the transportation study, is just the timing of everything, the timing of when the buses are on the campus and parents, and maybe restricting and having dedicated times. It would be a culture shift for our district, but we may be at the point where we need to do that and look at that. So there are some things that we'll be looking at.
So with the way the market trends for drivers seeming to be going and not letting up. Do we have space and wiggle room for it would be inevitable when everyone around us raises their rates and we start seeing the other side of this thing that kind of has some wiggle room to adjust, or is that something that's a problem we tackle when we get there?
Yeah, I think is this the second adjustment, rate adjustment for the drivers, the second one?
Correct. This is the
Yeah.
second rate adjustment. The first one was minimal compared
Yeah.
to the current
I
market.
mean, as you can see, this is significant, and this does have us near the upper third.
Correct.
Where we're in the bottom third now. So I'm hoping this gives us time. But I've talked about it before. You want to play nice in the sandbox with the fellow school districts, and there are some that have just gone real high, and then they pillage drivers from other districts. So we not collusion, but we need to work together because we're all having the same problem.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we need a motion from the Building, Grounds, and Finance Committee to move this forward to the voting meeting.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. That concludes the Building, Finance, and Grounds Committee portion of the working session. With that, I'm going to move to Zoom.
Okay, so we are going to be skipping agenda item 5 because for unfortunate emergent circumstances this evening, we find ourselves without quorum with Mrs. Munson and Mrs. Sabo not in attendance. And unfortunately, we did not know that would happen until about 5:30 this evening when there was an emergent situation. So we are going to move forward to agenda item 6. And Dr. Rattoli.
Okay, we have with us this evening Mr. Stolzfus, middle school principal, to discuss his proposal for a dean of students.
Good evening. I appreciate a little bit of cushion, not make me go immediately after the teachers went. I didn't know we were supposed to bring shirts and gifts, so I apologize. So I've got nothing for you.
It would have been a good idea.
Just information I have for you tonight, just information. And some of the information that I have for you tonight I know is information that you've already seen either because Dr. Stout has presented it to you previously, or I know some of you I spoke to about this more informally during your building visit with me. But as you know, we're requesting a Dean of Students for the coming school year. And this has been kind of something we've been considering over time, and really as the last 2 years have gone by here have been making a more serious push for. The data you see on the screen right now is just kind of a summary of some data over the last several years, minus I think the 2021 school year, because that data when we had partial students attending and partial students at home is kind of comparing apples to oranges. But you can see over time here, and important to note also as you look at the 2022-23 numbers for our discipline referrals, that is just through or up to March 1st. So it does not include the last couple months and change. So those numbers are actually a little higher, and by the time the end of the year comes around, in their totality, obviously will be higher as well than what you see there. But one thing that kind of jumps out, aside from the number of referrals being issued, the number of students being issued discipline over that time, is in particular the last 2 rows, if you will, these suspensions, both in and out of school suspensions, pardon me, have increased in particular over the last 2 years. And what that tells you is that the severity of what's going on, the severity of infractions that students are becoming involved with is greater because we reserve suspensions, whether they be in-school suspensions or out-of-school suspensions, we reserve those for our more serious infractions, obviously. And the lunch detention that you see up top there, that's kind of our lowest level. That's, you're having lunch for a day in the office or with a specific teacher, if a teacher has issued it to a student, and then kind of work your way up. We don't utilize Saturday detentions a whole. That's why I see those numbers very low there. Saturday detentions are run at the high school, and so they allow us to assign middle school students to that, but we try to stay away from that if at all possible. If for nothing else, then we have middle school student coming over and spending time with several high school students here for 3 hours. And we do have, other alternatives, whether they be after school detentions or in-school suspensions at our disposal. But there are times when that's more effective to use, but it's infrequent for that reason, as you see there.
Mr. Stoltzfus, can I ask one quick?
Sure can.
Within the lunch and after-school detention, does that also include those who are receiving detention for tardiness and absenteeism? Those are in that number?
It does. They're factored in there as well. And that's, we see students, and I say we, our assistant principals, see students regularly for regular tardiness. We don't go, and listen, it starts with conversations, right? So if you hit 3 tardies to school, we don't say, hey, come on in, here's your detention for you. We start with having conversations. What's going on? Can you explain to me what your morning routine looks like? Do you set an alarm? Do you get up when that alarm goes off? So we have those conversations, and it's more of, kind of a mediation, a counseling, if you will, that's taking place there, and warnings. And then if we see the pattern continues, it might be, hey, now you've got to come in for lunch. It continues and continues beyond that. Now we're talking about after school. So, we do assign consequence eventually for things like tardies to school, or but there's a lot that takes place before we get to that point. Engagement with families and things like that. So, but what happens as you see these numbers go up is that, and what I've noticed from my seat over the last couple of years is that I spend much less time where I feel I need to be, which is in classrooms, interacting with teachers, seeing instruction taking place, walkthroughs, interacting with students in hallways and classrooms. That is a much smaller percentage of my time that I would like to see it. And I would say the same is true of our assistant principal as well. And there's many factors for that. I'm not one who likes to blame things on COVID, but I would be foolish to think that there hasn't been an increase in behaviors that kind of correlates with coming out of COVID and the way students had to learn during that time, and the fact that they weren't around peers in classrooms and in the school and interacting with teachers. And so there might be a bit of a curve there, a gap that needs to be closed. We'll see over time if that's the case or not. But in addition to that, if you can go to the next slide, Dr. Cicito, we have, as we go through a lot of these things that are already in place, many of them are things that allow students, parents, teachers to more easily refer things that they see, things that are going wrong. We can use, whether it be Safe to Say, which was brought up earlier, our Olveus anti-bullying program, which we've created an online forum so students and parents can refer things on there if need be. So it's become easier, and we have software that monitors student technology use. Now we're one-on-one with students, and they have a computer in their possession, not only at school but at home as well, that they can access. And we have software that allows us to see, are they accessing things they shouldn't be? Are they communicating with one another in ways that they shouldn't be? So we get reports, we get hits that come back to us daily. Dr. Cito can speak to that for sure. Daily, multiple times daily, that so-and-so did a search for this. This was an email conversation between some students that have been taking place. So it's become easier to identify when there's issues with students, which increases the number of times we have to see students. And we'd like to believe that for every referral that is sent to us, that we give it its due diligence. We vet that and make sure that we interview students, and if we have to pull cameras, we pull cameras, and a lot of that is very time consuming. There's vandalism in a bathroom somewhere, it's been destroyed. When did it happen? It happened between these 2 hours. Okay, let's go to the video. And when you go to the video and you're watching something that happened in a 2-hour window, you're watching 2 hours of who's going in and out of that bathroom. And if there's 25 kids that have gone in that bathroom, you're interviewing 25 kids to try to find out, did anybody see something, hear something, do something? So it's very time consuming. By no means, the dean of student would help with that for a lower level type of stuff, or to free up some of those little things, bus referrals. We talk about, other things that come through our offices every day. Drivers have the ability to refer behavior on bus. So-and-so standing, they're in the aisle, they had their phone out, they're taking pictures, they use foul language. Things like that come to us right now, and we deal with it. But that's the type of thing that a dean of students could deal with. It wouldn't suck up 2 hours of our day right now as it is, and allow us to get out into classrooms and seeing instruction and improving from that capacity. And I won't read all these to you up there. You know what we have in place right now, both proactive and we do have things that are in place on a proactive standpoint. Certainly a dean of students, or even as we're dealing with it right now as school administrators, building administrators, we're reactive. So something has happened, we're now dealing with it in the aftermath and investigating and assigning consequences and trying to figure out, where does the truth lie? Sometimes you get a story from one student, a completely different story from the other side, and where in the middle is where's the answer? Where's the truth in all this? So sometimes you find that, and sometimes it becomes more difficult. But again, the idea is that it's time consuming, but we do have things in place on a proactive side that we tried to address. We've increased the number of staff that we have in the cafeteria this year for our lunches. That was a hot spot for us as we examined kind of our building over the last couple of years. Hallways, bathrooms, cafeteria, right? The less structured or unstructured or less monitored areas. Bell rings every 45 minutes, 900 students are in the hallways moving from point A to point B. 7 times a day, that happens. And there aren't teachers, it's not single file, you're leading your class from one class to the next. It's bell rings, they're out. And it's like the running of the bulls out there. So the less structured areas were hot spots for us. So we increased the number of teachers that we had in our cafeteria to monitor that space to the best of our ability. We were able to put some teachers on hall duty throughout the day, not every period. If we had enough ability to do that, we would certainly do that every period, but at least some periods of the day, we have teachers on hall duty throughout the week. We did begin using eHall Pass this year. Again, when we talk about bathrooms, for those who don't know what eHall Pass is, it's basically a way that we can kind of track who's been in and out of bathrooms. Students, if they want to use the bathroom, they create a pass for themselves on their Chromebooks. Teacher approves it on there, and it keeps a log of who's been out, where they went, assuming they went to where they said they were going, and when they returned as well. But it also offers us the ability to do some other things, like if we notice there are students who are out 2,000 times already this year from their classes, don't laugh because some are close to that. It allows us to put limits on how frequently they can exit a classroom, because some were doing every single period. And the teachers previously would have no idea. If the student asked to leave my classroom, did they leave the period right before mine too, and the one before that, and the one before that? We had no idea. So it allows us to monitor that. If there are students who seem to always be in the hallway together and getting into trouble together, it allows us to use A/B polarity to restrict them from being out at the same time. So it'll just say, sorry, you can't leave right now, and try again in a few minutes, and they will. And if the other student returns, then that other student can leave then. So it does offer some nice features in that regard. But so we've tried to put some things in place. The new cell phone policy, which at the middle school is it's to be off and away. Last year we went from 2 years ago off and away to last year trying a green, yellow, red system in our building where they could have it on their person all day, but could only use it with permission from the teacher. Well, if it's on your person, 13, 14-year-old students are going to use it. And they were, but and some were using it responsibly, and unfortunately others were not. And they were on Snapchat and taking pictures of one another, and it was all in the bathrooms, and there was some bullying going on online. So that sucked up a lot of time with referrals last year. So we decided to go back to where we were initially, which was it's off and away. We don't need to have our cell phones on during the day. When school's over and you're home, feel free to use it as you wish. But there's with every student having a Chromebook, there's nothing that they can't do on there that they wouldn't need their phone for. So I will tell you that policy, I can't tell you that I've had to deal with any social media bullying situations that happened in school this year, and it was regular last year. With that, I don't think I've had to deal with it all year long. So that has been a plus for us in that regard. We have implemented, after years of talking about it and kind of throwing ideas around, we finally this year started to implement our PBIS program, our positive behavior, because we do want to not just punish when students make bad choices. We want to also reward when they're doing good things and when they're making positive choices and doing the right thing. So we've started our PBIS this year. We continue to kind of grow that, and next year hopefully go next level with some of that, with some lessons that we can teach along with that program as well. This year it's been more students being able to earn rewards, whether it's tangible rewards or going to shoot hoops with their favorite teacher in the gym during the end of the day win period, whatever it may be. So there's all kinds of rewards. Pizza with the principal, that's my favorite. So there's things like that that are in place to reward for positive behavior as well, because we don't want to forget that, as well as addressing the negative behavior when we need to. Yeah, so in our advisory meetings as well, our advisory meets every day 6 in our every other day 6, I'm sorry, in our 6-day cycle. And we try to deliver some lessons during those advisory meetings that are very pro-social, accepting differences, tolerance, how to identify your needs, or when you need something emotionally, if you need a break, what do you do? What are your coping mechanisms that are available to you? What supports do we have in the building for you? So we do use those advisory meetings in that manner as well. And final slide, Frank. As we look ahead as well, we hope that on the back end of things, the Dean of Students will help lighten some of the load, but we don't want to say, okay, that's going to fix the problem, right? We realize we still need other things that need to be addressed. So we continue to look for ways to increase mental health supports in our building, from mental health scholastic coach that we'll be interviewing for down the road here, to peace kits. That's something we're kind of piloting right now in a couple classrooms, and those are something that we hope will catch on to aid students in being more self-aware, to deal with some resiliency, to help with their academic endurance. Right now, there's some students that if they're having an issue in a classroom and they don't have any mechanisms in place or know how to cope with that, their first reaction is to, flight. I'm going to leave the room. I need to go somewhere. I need to go to this other place. And in doing so, they're missing instruction. And it may be something that really, if they had a fidget available to them or something they could read, they can take the 2 minutes in a classroom setting, do that, and get in the right mental space to get back at it right away in the classroom without having to leave the room. So we're piloting a couple of those, as I said, between now and the end of the school year. We'll see how that goes, and hopefully can broaden that next year as well. We also have a committee right now who is exploring our first week of school and how can we help with not only the transition for 6th graders coming into our building and 7th graders, but also 7th to 8th grade. Knowing that we need to be perhaps more purposeful with teaching behaviors we expect. I think to our own fault, we've kind of assumed a great deal in past years, assumed that when they came to us, they would understand how to act in a hallway, how to act in the cafeteria, how do you speak to teachers, how do you speak to one another, what does respect look like when you're, how to keep your hands to yourself. So we assumed that was already there, and we're discovering that for many, it's not. So we want to be a little bit more purposeful in that week 1 to kind of take some time, in addition to having them go to their classes and meet their teachers, but also spend time explicitly teaching. Here's how we move from point to point. Here's how we act in the cafeteria. So we want to, someone doesn't know math, you teach them how to do math. They don't know, ELA, you teach them how to read and write. If they don't know how to behave a certain way, we punish them, and that's not the only answer. It can't be. So we want to teach them how to behave appropriately. As I mentioned, continue to grow our PBIS program. And then during our advisory, I mentioned we use our advisory to kind of teach those lessons that we want to teach to students that will help them. We are going to pilot a second step program. I believe in a couple of weeks we'll be having some teachers piloting that during our advisory in May here. And that second step program is kind of a canned curriculum. For all levels of education. They have a middle level program, and the 4 bullets you see underneath there are mindset and goals and so forth. Those are kind of the areas, the themes that are in that second step program that we hope to use to drive the lessons for our advisory. Right now we have teachers spending a great deal of time developing lessons for the rest of the teachers on whatever the theme or the topic might be for that day. We want to have a proven, something that studies have proven works program that is in place that we can use. So we're piloting that between now and the end of the year, and might be something that we go with for next year as well. Those are my 3 slides. I'm going to give as much time to you to ask whatever questions you have of me, and your time now.
I have a couple of questions. What would you say is the greatest increase of disciplinary infractions that you see, and how will this Dean of Students position deal with that?
Yeah. So I would say probably the greatest increase right now is student-to-student interactions. Not a whole lot of thought going into what you say to another person before you say it. Not a whole lot of thought put into what happens if I put my hands on someone, if I push them. Even, a lot of times the first, oh, we're friends, but it's, you push your friend the wrong way, suddenly you're not friends anymore. So, I'd say our greatest increase is just that interpersonal interaction, student to student, and sometimes student to adult as well. There seems to be a general lack of respect from some students toward authority figures. They use language and speak in ways that is kind of new, and oftentimes there are some adults and teachers in the building that are flabbergasted by that and don't quite know. It's a delicate balance, because we'd like to think that we show a great deal of grace and understanding, and our mindset, our first reaction oftentimes is, what is the student dealing with? It's not, I can't believe you talked to me that way. What has happened? Like, what has led to this interaction between you and I? Did something happen in class? Did something happen at home? Did something happen on the bus on the way in? What are you dealing with? So, there's some of those questions that have to be asked, that the teacher who has 30 other students coming in the next class period, 25, whatever it may be, coming in the next class period, or has students in the room right now, that teacher doesn't have the time in that space to have that depth of a conversation with the student. So one of the hopes is that a dean of students will be a consistent person who can make those connections, establish those relationships, perhaps with some of our most frequent flyers in particular, and recognize that there's a person here who they can establish that kind of connection with and have that, and there's a consistency there as well. There are students right now who one day might deal with the assistant principal, the next day they deal with me, the next day it's a guidance counselor, the next day it's someone from the Alveus discipline team. There's a lot going on, a lot of people you might be talking to depending on what you've said or done, and one of the hopes is that a consistent person might be able to establish some connections, not only with students, but also with families, that is, works both ways.
So it would be primarily a kind of reactive position, like
Yeah.
they would be dealing with the discipline referrals.
Right. Now, I will tell you, this is also a person who we see getting involved with, there was brought up earlier, late truancy, late to school. The person who, if they have to go to court for truancy, would step in and take on that role as well. Someone who can be in the cafeteria for lunches each day as well, be a common face down there for people to see. But and also become involved in the PBIS program. So when we talk about, yes, it is reactive, but they will also be someone who's involved in our PBIS programming, in our advisory lessons that we're rolling out. They're the people who could say, this individual could be someone who could say, I'm seeing a lot of students for this lately. how can we somehow get a lesson on that topic before it continues to snowball out of control? So yes, dealing with things on the reactive side, but also someone who helps with the planning and upfront stuff as well.
Has the increased staffing in the cafeteria and the hall duty, has that helped?
No. It's helped in that there's more eyes to see things going on, which means there's more students who are being reported for their behaviors from there, which leads to what I'm talking about right now. So there's kind of it's a good thing that we have more folks down there, but what that also does is that there's more students who are being seen behaving in ways they shouldn't be and are being referred for that, which means we're seeing more students in the office for it. So, but has it curbed or changed the students' behaviors? Not really.
Interesting. Really?
Can I? I'm just looking at the discipline referrals over time slide that you presented. I'm going to disagree with you a little bit in that COVID is a result of the behaviors we're seeing now, because I think the anomaly on this chart is actually the COVID years in which you saw a reduction of referrals because they weren't in school.
Right.
Your trend really started between the 17-18 and 18-19 year. I think you really need to go back and take a look at what occurred in between those 2 years to determine why there was such an increase in referrals between those 2 years. What you're seeing now, I think, is just a acceleration of that trend that occurred from that period in time. So I think that one of the other things, in looking at the position description for the Dean of Students, I think would be really important is to incorporate some sort of metric so we can have an evaluation of this position at the end of the year to show, yeah, it was effective. I don't see anything built in there about, the goal or the intention of, is the intention of this position to reduce these discipline referrals, to really handle the discipline, that it's going to actually show that we're, curbing behaviors. I want to see more metrics built into this that we can evaluate at the end of the year, so we know whether or not this position is worth it. And then secondly, the other thing I'm looking at in this chart, is there particular methods that are more effective in terms of, discipline that we're utilizing? So, is lunch detention even really a deferral? If it's not, why do we have it? We might want to look at something that's just more effective rather than more things of, discipline that really aren't doing anything.
Yeah, Dan, you hit on two things that don't reconcile for me. One is, I don't see anything on here, and it may just be ignorance on my part, about looking behind these numbers, right? What are the causes of the escalation as opposed to just more eyes or more reports, right? And does that warrant a change in our philosophy and the way we deal with discipline, or how we approach it? You mentioned earlier, and I noticed it with my own children, just the way they speak to each other now. Sometimes I'm like, whoa, back when I was growing up, that would lead to an escalation. Right, so, but to them, that's normal manners of speaking now, right? So does that mean we need to evolve as educators and as parents and as faculty to kind of look at that differently outside of what our upbringing taught us? And the second thing that doesn't reconcile for me right now is you mentioned this position would form relationships and bonds, but as I recall, this is only a teacher on assignment for 1 year. So how do those relationships stay and connected if this person is only here for a short time and then his role vanishes?
Sure, and I'll weigh in on that as well, because it will be a teacher on assignment. You're right, we're looking to do it 1 year, but then we want to see how effective it is and how is it working. I do think it is and I like some of these questions here because, when you look at student discipline, it's evolved from when I was back in school where it was just the hammer. So we're, looking at the PBIS program, looking at root causes, there's a lot of work with trauma-informed care. What's the reason behind some of these behaviors? So we have, a number of counselors. Last year, we increased, we added a counselor to the middle school, a permanent counselor, so now we have 3 at the middle school. I think this dean of students will just be another, I think it's twofold. It will help with the volume of discipline that we're having because we do have a high volume, but, and again, we'll have to see how it works out, but it could actually be a teacher who's currently teaching with us that would be that teacher on assignment. Then we would have to hire someone to take their half-day teaching load. So that would be someone who would already have relationships formed with the students. But, when Corbin and I have talked about this, and, he has not asked me for anything since I've been the superintendent here for 2 years, and he came to me and he said, I really, really could use a dean of students. And I said, well, I need to be convinced because I had those requests before in my former role in another district and was not convinced. But my conversations with Corbin and looking at the numbers, looking at our needs, whether it's pre-COVID or post-COVID, I mean, certainly kids are, and you can ask any teacher in our district, are behind socially in their interactions and how to behave appropriately. And self-regulation, we've seen a decline in that. So given all those variables, I strongly support this position. And we are going to have to determine metrics. If we say if referrals go up, was it unsuccessful? Well, maybe not. Maybe because we have the person in there and we're dealing with more issues. But over time, my ultimate goal would be to have these referrals go down. And Dan, you referenced it to like the 2017, 2018 levels. And whether that's through changing some discipline practices or whether it's through some of the other SEL type of work that we're doing, just having students recognize their behavior. So I know that was kind of a long answer to a short question, but we don't have the metrics yet, but I think it's a position that we sorely need.
One metric
Go on,
I was thinking about, this position is going to save you time, right? If you could, maybe you do this already, like jot down how much time you're spending on discipline this year, and then compare it to like next year. Because if the dean comes on and you're still doing more discipline than you want to, then how did that person help out?
Right. Yeah, I don't want there to be any misinterpretation. I recognize that handling discipline is part of my job, for certain. And I'm okay with having it be part of my job. But it's become, the balance, the scale has tilted pretty extremely to a side where I'm not able to be the instructional leader that I want to be in my building. And that's what's concerning to me, so.
Yeah, and you really don't need to be looking at that tape for 2 hours. So that's something that will hopefully save a lot of time in that regard.
I agree with Dr. Malmazek that one of the metrics I would be interested in is how this shifts your role and responsibility back to instructional leadership. And then I think in terms of the actual referral number, I also think it's important to see, do we, and this may be something we see over more than 1 year, 1 to 2 years, is the lessening of more extreme infractions. I think when you, as you said, when you have more eyes on the students, we will see more, and we may not immediately see a lowering of referrals or incidents. But my hope with this type of role is that it frees you up to provide the leadership required so that we can see a lessening in the extremeness of some of our infractions. I think that's really, for me, looking at the goal of this position, is we may not see an immediate drop in the number of tardies or the number of those lower level infractions, but the hope is that some of these more extreme behaviors that we haven't necessarily seen at the middle school level before are addressed by a change like this.
I think your thought about more time on the transition from the elementary is really an important one, that kids are going from having a small number of teachers to a larger number of teachers, having much more movement around the building, which is really a climate and culture issue, where they don't feel that kind of attachment that they did to the smaller number of teachers in the elementary grades. So it looks like you really have to like look at other, how are other 7th, 8th grade middle schools configured to attack that issue of a kid's attachment to the behavior in the building? And how have other middle schools navigated these kind of climate and culture issues?
I'm going to ask to let Mr. Harmonos is online with a question.
Hi. A couple comments. I think that, you know, and I've mentioned this before under a few different, you know, issues with the middle school is that it's really tough because, you know, you only have the kids for 2 years. So you're spending 1 year, you know, getting them there, and then the next year they're kind of the king of the hill, and then they're moving out. So it's kind of tough to get them in that pattern. So I appreciate, you know, your challenge there. I want to add on to what Dan and Nick and Warren were saying about some of the discipline procedures. I think with kids nowadays, you know, and I think it's been moving this way, you know, over the years. This isn't just the last 5 years. This might be, you know, a 20-year trend, is that, you know, back in the, you know, when we were kids, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, you know, you would tell a kid, don't do this because I've said so. And that doesn't work anymore. You know, we need to give the kids reasons. We need to get them to understand, you know, why a behavior is good or why a behavior is bad, or, you know, why you need to stand in a line, you know, in a hallway. It seems silly, but, you know, there's a reason for it. So I think we have to give them the bigger picture. And then with that in mind, and this is a question that's been, you know, burning in my gut for, you know, over 30 years, or well, actually over 40 years, is what is the purpose of an in-school suspension, or suspension in general? It doesn't, you know, it doesn't make sense. You know, we want the kids to learn. We want kids to be educated. We want to give them the best opportunity to learn as possible. And it seems like in-school suspension is, for lack of a better word, a MacGuffin. You know, it's a thing we do to kids to say you're in big trouble. But, you know, there's really no lesson learned there, you know, and they're put further back behind in school. And I think we need to really think about that. I think we need to think about restorative justice practices too. So I know this is like maybe reaching outside of what we're talking about this evening, but I think that's something that I'd really like to, you know, the administration to look at hard is, you know, can we, you know, have restorative justice practices so that instead of just putting a kid in a room with his laptop for a day or 2 days or a week, you know, can we keep them in school, keep them educated, and get them to do something else that teaches them that lesson that we're trying to teach about, you know, maybe it's community service, maybe it's, you know, some kind of special project or something like that. And I think, you know, that takes a little bit more work. It's easy to throw a kid in a classroom and say, sit here for 3 days. But, you know, maybe this dean of students can work more with, you know, restorative justice practices.
Looking at this myself, I also have questions regarding just these discipline referrals. You know, so you see 335 lunch detentions, or, you know, all these numbers, but how many actors are we talking about here, you know, and versus, you know, incidences? Because, you know, obviously it doesn't seem like there's much deterrence for lunch detentions, but if that's the same 20 kids over and over again, that's different than if it's 335 kids all making one mistake one time. Yeah. So I have questions about that. Also questions just about how we can alter just the policies of what sort of, you know, how we mete out different expectations and punishments for kids, you know, if they do things, because maybe we don't have all the kids out in the hallway at one time. Stagger the bell schedule, so you deter that. I don't, I'm sort of more looking at, I know we want kids to understand that their behavior affects people, and we want them to get that, and we want to educate them in that way. But there just comes a time where kids need to be in their mind saying, wow, there's a really severe consequence if I do X, so I'm not going to do X. So I'd like to see that more like fleshed out in some sort of policies. Yeah, that's my just concern with the way we're kind of looking at this.
Yeah, I would probably add, and I'm putting my former high school principal hat on here, it's not 335 kids that are
Yeah.
doing this. It's probably
Right.
closer to 30, 40 or so that are multiple offenders, and we need to find a way to help those kids change their behavior. So, but I want to make sure I paint a good picture here. We have a great middle school. We have a great high school, but we have some bad actors, and every school district has that, and we need to develop ways that we can help those students. But we do have a higher volume, whether it's repeat offenders or not, and I think that this will be helpful. And Corbin reminded me, and I've said to him numerous times when I'm over there visiting him, most times when I stop over, he's dealing with discipline. And again, I'm putting my hat on. When I was a principal, it was reasonable if the assistant principal could do a lot of that, and I could do the big discipline issues so that I could be the instructional leader of the building. And I think Corbin is dealing with an inordinate amount of discipline that's taking him away from that.
Yeah, just one final comment. Maybe next year, mid-year, we get an update from the school climate committee as to how all those initiatives are working as part of tying all the pieces of this puzzle together and, dealing with the whole scope of things beyond the infractions to the whole sense of belonging to this middle school.
Ms. Crumrine, could you refresh my memory? Where are we with this? Do we have to approve this, or it was already approved, right?
It was already approved
this
in
is just
staffing. We were holding the posting.
Okay, so,
Until the board had further discussion.
okay, cool.
So the committee doesn't have to take any action at this point. So if personnel is done? Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schmaltz. Okay, so we are moving on to agenda item 7, new athletic programs with an update from Dr. Cuthbert.
So I'm going to be taking Randy's place tonight for this update. He is actually the chairperson for tennis, and the tennis championships are tonight. So he represents the league and has to be at that event. So, but I did have an opportunity to sit down and talk with him about this process, and Mrs. Crumrine and I and Dr. Cuthbert discussed it last week. So I just want to take a couple minutes and talk about the process for adding athletic teams in the district. We have had some requests that have come to the board, both formally and informally lately. And as I was just, jotting down my ideas, just in the short time I've been here, some of the athletic programs that have been proposed are unified sports for bocce and track and field, girls wrestling at the high school level, golf at the high school level, boys lacrosse at the middle school level, boys volleyball at the high school, girls volleyball at the middle school, and most recently, girls flag football. So just in my short tenure, these are just some of the folks that have been coming to us and requesting to be looking at adding sports or athletic teams to the district. So I want to take a few minutes tonight just to talk about the process for adding a team and some of the factors that we consider. There is not a board policy on this per se, so it really is a process that we need to set up internally and follow as an athletic department and administration. So the first slide here just says the factors that we look at when we get a request to add a team, and I'll spend a little time on each of these, but facilities and availability are a concern, the budget that it costs for these new programs, student interest. We certainly want to make sure if we're running something that it's something that students would be interested in. The PAC League and area school district participation. Are there other districts that are offering these programs so our kids would have a place to compete? And then the last one on here is our athletic department capacity to add additional sports programs. So the first one, facilities and availability. Frank, if you can move to the next slide. So just some of the things that we need to consider there, and we did the feasibility study a little bit earlier tonight, so that gym space and field space is a concern and an issue. So when we're looking to add a sport, we need to make sure that we do have the proper facilities, the appropriate gym space, and field availability if we do add that sport. So is it an on or off-campus sport? You know, now one of the club programs that we have, I think of it, is hockey. I mean, hockey is an off-campus sport. Golf is one that we're getting interest in developing a female or girls golf team. Golf is not an on-campus sport, so as long as we have an agreement with the golf course, we can add that. So that matters. The on-campus sports, we are limited in the spaces that we have. Do we have the capacity to accommodate another team in the facility? So we've talked about facilities. I know Randy's not here tonight, but our facilities, particularly when we are using gyms during the winter sports, are at their max, and it's difficult to find times. So you have the equipment setup. So one thing we don't talk a lot about is just, you know, we look at the field space and the setup for our events. You know, baseball game, someone has to line the lines, cut the grass. We have that for all of our fields, minus our turf fields. Also, we take into account equipment costs and what equipment do we need in order to set up a sport. And then locker room availability and storage needs. So storage continues to be a problem. So again, that is one of the factors that we consider when we're looking at proposals for new athletic teams. As far as the budget goes, you can see here equipment. So we have the general supplies, facility equipment improvements. You know, one of them I can think of is volleyball. If we were to move volleyball into one of our elementary schools, what would be the setup? Do we have to drill holes in the floor in order to put the poles in? So what type of equipment or facilities improvements do we need to add a sport? And then we have the uniforms as well. We have coaching salaries to consider. If it's a sanctioned sport, then we need to fund it through the salaries as well. Transportation, you've heard about some of our transportation woes. We added another team. There's additional transportation for that. We have the official fees, registration fees, security at different events, and then the utility. So if it's a program that's going to be using our stadium fields and for some evening events, then it's more nights that the lights are on. So those are just all factors that we look at in the budget. Interest and participation, so student interest. So I know at our last meeting, we had a proposal from middle school boys lacrosse. I know they have a very strong club program right now where they have 100 students. So for a sport like that, we know that there's a lot of interest already through their club programs. Documented signups and student interest. So in talking with Dr. Cuthbert, you know, if we're looking to add a sport, they survey students at the high school to see how many students may be interested. And I mentioned earlier the PAC League and area school district participation. So how many PAC local school districts have the requested sport? So again, I'm not trying to cherry pick sports, but one of the sports that we've heard from would be a boys volleyball team. We have girls volleyball. We do not have boys volleyball in the district. However, there's only one school in the Pac-10 that has a boys volleyball program. So do we want to invest in a boys volleyball program where we would be having to travel great distances in order to find competitors, because that other school, that's what they need to do in order to find different athletic events? And is it a PIAA sanctioned sport? So that's something else that we need to look at when we're considering it. And then the last thing, athletic department capacity. So, you know, every event that we run after school, we need an athletic director or a game manager there for the supervision. So any sport that we add, we need to increase the staffing and coverage there. Trainer coverage, we do need trainers to cover athletic programs that we have. The district has added a third athletic trainer this year, and it has been fantastic. We've received wonderful reports, but all three of them are extremely busy. And then I mentioned a little bit earlier just the field maintenance and setup. We have one person who's designated for our field maintenance and setup, and you know, we're adding sports. It's something else that we need to consider. So that's the process and the things that we look at in order to add a sport. But if we're looking to add sports, the process really starts with applicants. And I know I sat down with Mr. Cuthbert and with the folks that are looking at a middle school boys lacrosse team. But the applicants need to meet with the athletic director and the respective principal to submit their proposal. So as we look to add sports in the future, it starts with a proposal going to the athletic director, then the athletic director bringing that proposal to the administration to consider it, where we're looking at a lot of these factors that we said today, budgets, facilities, so on and so forth, and then determine if we have the capacity in order to add the sport. As someone who was a three-sport athlete in high school and played at the collegiate level, athletics are extremely important to me personally, and I've seen the benefit that it has for our kids. So if we have the capacity to add sports programs for our kids or extracurricular programs outside of athletics, I'm all in because I see the benefits, but we also have to be prudent about it and make sure that we have the capacity and ability to do it and to do it well. So that's the information that I have regarding the process. So I'll take any questions that you may have.
Do you know how many middle school boys lacrosse teams that there are in the pack?
I'm not sure how many there are in the pack, but, excuse me, in looking at our surrounding schools, a number of our surrounding schools do have middle school boys lacrosse.
And then how about the girls wrestling?
The girls wrestling is unique because right now there are girls that are wrestling, but it's not a separate program. So the PIAA right now is evaluating adding wrestling as a sanctioned sport.
Okay, it's not sanctioned at
So
this
it's
time.
not yet, but it's very close. It's going to happen. But a number of school districts throughout the state, they keep a running list, are adding wrestling. But again, I don't think, I wish Randy was here for that one. I don't think
Someone's
it's
raising their
quite
hand in the
approved
audience who
yet,
maybe knows.
but I know it's in the process.
There are 107 schools in Pennsylvania that have sanctioned official girls high school wrestling team.
Okay.
There are 13 in District 1 and
Yeah,
5 in the pack. Boyertown, Perk Valley, Upper Perk, Pottstown, and
That's close, that's close enough.
and,
Thank you.
and
5.
a couple more that are right on the verge, right? So, it's really building into that. It did pass the first 2 readings with unanimous approval of the PIAA. The third and final reading is, I think, in 2 weeks this month for final sanctioning for girls wrestling. There are 7 girls that have said they want to wrestle in high school, including 5 that were on the middle school team last year, and there'll be an additional 5 on the middle school team.
Okay, thanks.
So I knew wrestling was close to being sanctioned, and like I said, a number of school districts. And thank you, sir, for that information. So, they are, correct. But if we would add the sport, then we would be looking to have a separate girls program to compete with other girls.
So I had a question, and this may be more appropriate for Dr. Cuthbert. I wanted to get a better understanding in terms of facility usage, how, no other way to say this, what is the pecking order of usage? For instance, we've heard from many of our band parents recently that they frequently, our indoor drum line gets bumped from their scheduled gym space when when, for instance, it's raining and a team needs conditioning. And so without consideration, our band students get bumped from reserved gym spaces. So I want to, as I said, that may be a better question for Dr. Cuthbert. When I look at, for instance, our marching band doesn't get use of the stadium for practice. They practice in a parking lot. So how does this all flow? I know that his responsibility is looking at, do we have space within our facilities for our athletic teams, but where are we accounting for other school groups that are using these spaces who are not athletic teams, and where do they fall when a decision needs to be made of who gets the space? Sure,
and I'm going to just speculate on this. In my previous experiences, it was always the sports teams that were in season would have priority. So if it's an outdoor sport and it gets moved in because of inclement weather, then that team would have priority. But then after that, then it's open season, so to speak, for our other programs that are available. So again, I'm just speculating now.
And from the perspective, and I don't have a child in this organization, but from the perspective of the indoor drumline parents, for instance, they compete as well.
Yeah.
And they have a competition on Saturday, they get bumped from their gym space that week. It's effective to their competitions.
Sure.
So I want to, understand what our overarching, plan is when we are faced with who gets, priority of a usage throughout the entire district. And also that applies to outside organizations like Coventry Lacrosse or Coventry Basketball or whomever that has, usage or an agreement or believe they have that space reserved. How do we prioritize who gets that usage of space, in this case, in an inclement weather situation?
Sure, and that's something we can look at, and we can get that information.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm also wondering, as we're asking questions about this, like, so say there's girls wrestling, because the girls right now wrestle, I guess, in the boys' team or whatever, can they, even if they have their own team, are they able to use the same space or use the same, maybe they could still share the facility?
Yeah, that's the one thing about wrestling. They would. We have the wrestling room, so they would share the space. So when you look at facilities, we wouldn't have to add additional space or look at other facilities or other gym usage because we have the wrestling room and we could designate an area that they could use the wrestling room.
Okay, and then also just regarding the whole indoor drum line, if they're being bumped, I mean, I know that it's really hard for them to move all their equipment somewhere else, but possibly it could be considered that these teams that need to come indoors would be the ones to move to another facility or another area because they could get themselves to a different place without moving 3 marimbas and a timpani set and all that kind of stuff. So just something to consider as we're doing this.
And I've seen the indoor drum line in this room when I've walked by, so I think they make it work. But we need to find that out and what the priority is.
And also, how much more can we utilize our elementary schools for things? For smaller activities, I think they would,
Well, and what about the service center too? We still have unused space in that building. Maybe some of that could be purposed for these types of things.
Yeah, now the district service center, all the former gym is now warehouse over there.
Boy, maybe that was a bad move.
But this is not unique to O&J. Every place that I've been, there's always a shortage of gym space and field space. So I was excited to hear some of the things in the feasibility study tonight. But even eventually, if we're able to do all that, we'll outgrow it. That's just the issue because you have a lot of folks that want to use it. And, we want to be good stewards of the community as well, the youth programs. But sometimes they're out because we just don't have the ability or the space for them to use.
Just one more question there. So you said that these applicants are meeting with the athletic director and so will that come before us after all those details are ironed out and then we will have to approve or not approve?
Yeah, in talking with Mr. Cuthbert, I believe we're going to be bringing several programs for recommendation to implement for next year. So we would be looking to bring that in June.
Okay, thanks.
So that hits on one question I had. I didn't see in here timing for this. I would imagine if it's something that we need to make an investment in for equipment and we've already approved the budget, like how's that handled?
Yeah, so if we bring programs to you, the ones that we would be bringing to you would have a minimal impact because we've already done the budget. But so it will, and thanks for pointing that out. I probably should have put some type of timeline in there. But yes, we would want to be doing that in the fall when we're developing the budget so that we can incorporate that into the budget if we're looking to add a program.
And the only other thing I didn't see, but I know it's our consideration because I think we talked about it last time, is Title IX.
Title IX, correct. It is a consideration. But in talking with Mr. Cuthbert, we're in pretty good shape as a district with the number of female sports that we have compared to male sports. So it's always a consideration, but it's not an obstacle for us at this point.
I'd just like to add that I think these are, all the things, whether it's, wrestling or volleyball or lacrosse, getting kids involved in these activities is a plus for our district. I think that might help with some of the discipline programs. So I think that, I really want to encourage, as many of these programs as we can handle, just, for the sake of the kids in the community.
Okay, thank you. We only have one. Okay, we are moving on to agenda item 8, 2023-2024 school board meetings and working sessions schedule. We are in the process of setting our schedule for next year so that it can be advertised correctly and legally. We will be moving our school board meetings to a uniform start time. Right now, we have 2 different start times for working sessions and voting meetings. So we'll be moving them all to a 6 o'clock start time. So hopefully to remove any confusion and to make it easier for ourselves and the community. And then second, moving forward into next school year, our school board meetings would continue to be live streamed, but would not have the Zoom functionality. So participation in those meetings would have to be in room. So we still will completely live stream the meetings in real time. Our community can watch the meetings from wherever it fits them, but to participate, we will be in the room. We are the only school left in Chester County that is still offering a Zoom option. The rest of the county has moved away from that in favor for in-person participation, which I think we all agree makes for a better meeting and a clearer communication with our community. So are there any questions about RMS moving forward?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. So what does that mean for board members having if they have to be out of town or whatever?
You can listen the same as people at home,
But
but
not vote.
you cannot vote. You will have to be in the room to vote moving forward.
How does that impact quorum?
We
just won't have it.
you will have to be present. And, our school board existed for generations in that manner prior to COVID. So
I completely disagree with this, Rita. I'm on Zoom now, I understand, but I don't understand why would we move backward in technology. I don't know why we would take away more participation from the public by taking it off Zoom. I don't know why we would make things more difficult for the board members by taking it off Zoom. I don't agree with this in any way.
And I appreciate that, Dave. I understand, but as I said, this is, how our community and our peers are moving forward, and.
But is there some economic reason? Like, is there some other, obstacle or hurdle that this is causing?
Yeah, actually, David, there is. We want to move our working sessions in particular to different locations in the district, as has been the practice in the past, and the Zoom option is prohibitive to that. The live stream is a much easier way to handle that.
And so do you think that the change in location is better for public participation than the removal of the Zoom? And do you have some evidence of that?
In attending those in the past at different locations in the district, I think it encourages public in the more opportunity to attend meetings in their area, as has mirrored our recent town halls. We had great participation at the town halls when they were in different locations in the district, so I would hope that the same would follow.
Yeah, because it seems like, and really, I don't, the fact that our peers don't do it holds no water with me. I mean, why would we not be a leader in this type of technology?
From my perspective, David, the purpose and the intention is to move the conversation back into the room, and the quality of the conversation when we are all together makes it worthwhile.
I'm inclined to agree with David. Why will we go back in time? I mean, at one point, we weren't using computers, but now we are, right? I don't know if it's a matter of, we can still have some discussion about it, maybe offline, and just kind of vet it a little bit more, but I do think, I'm also not following how the live stream feature can move with us, but not the Zoom chat feature. Like
This microphones. In order to
hear everything.
Right,
I mean, that sounds like something we can easily clear, a hurdle we can easily clear.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Right, we have looked into that, and
Has
it is
it?
not
Okay.
as easy or cost effective or cost appreciative as we would hope.
Fair enough. Maybe
Well,
you can send that information out again, just because I wasn't a part of that conversation. So.
I know we had asked for that information, but I don't ever remember seeing a cost on that.
we'll get you a cost. Yep.
I personally don't look at it as not using technology appropriately. I agree that even though, there's technological advances that you can use in all different ways, I do appreciate a live meeting where I can see everyone and people. I think just communication is so much better that way. So I appreciate this move.
And this continues
And
to.
I understand that, I think live is better. I 100% agree with that. But I think in terms of, equity and inclusion, I think this is a step in the wrong direction.
It still allows the messaging in real time and the communication in real time. What it doesn't allow for is someone who is not in the room to communicate at that same time.
And is that fair?
Yeah, I don't disagree that it's better to have the conversation in person, but again, we kind of say, oh, it's a post-COVID world that we're going back to. There are people who still won't come into a space like this because of post-COVID fears, right? So we disclude them when we don't allow them to interact via technology, right? So I don't know if that was ever a consideration, but I think it should be.
Yeah, my thinking on it is, I mean, obviously during COVID, I think it was a good accommodation, for safety, but, and again, our technology folks could speak about it, in much more detail than me, but we've had some issues. Number one, if we do move, it is rather expensive. When I was actually attending one online, there was profanity that was being pumped into the meeting. So it really, when you have that two-way communication, there are really factors that are out of our control. Is someone who is speaking, is it a resident or not? We don't know that. So I agree. I think it was a great accommodation for COVID, but I think we're at a point now where if someone wants to make a public comment, we'd love to have them come here. In fact, we welcome that. But more importantly, we're giving them access to every meeting. So they'll see the work of the board through live stream. They just would not be able to communicate with us.
I think we're ready to open up to comment.
Yep.
So if there's anyone in the room who would like to comment on something we discussed tonight, we invite you to do so now. Okay, give me a minute. Let me finish my statement. If you are on Zoom and would like to comment, please raise your hand. While we don't have a formal time limit and et cetera, we do ask you to keep in mind that everyone in the room has been here for 2 hours and 37 minutes.
Thank you. Paula Terrell, North Coventry. My compliments to the staff for introducing the STEM program this evening. I wish this program was available when my kids were here. My daughter's now at Thomas Jefferson University in STEM making vaccines, and my son as well, our son as well, is in the science field. So this is something that I really support. I'm thrilled that we're doing this at an elementary level, and I'll do whatever I can as a parent to help continue to grow these STEM and STEEL programs. Second compliment is to our president, Rita, for bringing up the pecking order regarding athletics and how our band continues to get bumped out for whether it be club activities or other paid activities here. I'm a big supporter of the band, and it really bums me out that they continue to get bumped around and tossed around for the athletic programs. The third question, I assume will come in at May, that I'd like to address regarding the athletic program. I'm sorry that the director is not here tonight, but I do have concerns with the athletic department regarding activities that are parent-run, that are not through the funds, that don't come through the general public. Having been part of the aquatic program years ago, there were some significant issues that I'm sure the board may be aware of with funding parents running the program and the money's going through the parents. So I think that's something that needs to be looked at. I may not be phrasing it correctly, but for me, when we move forward with the athletic part, any kind of money that is raised should be coming through the school board. Parents shouldn't be having to, should not be touching this money at all. So they were my 3 compliments, 2 in the athletic piece as well. Thank you for your time.
John Callier, the middle school lacrosse program. To answer your question, there are currently 6 PAC schools that have middle school lacrosse, and 2 of them, I think, have a 7th and 8th grade program. And they're all along the 422 corridor. If you go 100 south, very close to the Downingtown East and West, and all the Westchesters, they all have 7th and 8th grade programs. So within 30 minutes of here, if we put together a 12-game schedule, 6 home, 6 away, we would not have to travel very far. With that said, I actually want to just bring up attendance, academics, and behavior. So I had 2 kids that have graduated through O&J, went through the middle school. Hopefully you don't know the last name Kaye too well. No, you do? Okay, but I went to Springford growing up, and I recently spoke with the retired athletic director there, Mickey McDaniel, who I said to him, I said, I'm sorry, I remember your wife a little bit more than you, no offense, but she was my high school girlfriend's cheer coach, and he was like an assistant basketball coach at the time. But he went on to run and add many, many middle school programs at Springford, as that school district has obviously grown, as we've all known. And he actually talked about a few things that came up tonight. And I dealt with my own 2 children that have graduated, and one went on to play lacrosse in college, the other one chose not to, and my current 9th grader. When these kids are playing sports, they personally worry about their own attendance, because they know if they don't come to school, they can't participate in the afternoon. And obviously we want them to come and learn all day, but whatever motivates that kid to make sure that he's in school is important. Academics, and I guess maybe I'm on public, and hopefully, I don't know if this is going to go public, but my 9th grader, he was fortunate enough to be in the 3rd varsity position as a golfer this year. He's a good little golfer, and he got himself in a little bit of academic trouble in the fall. And suddenly, we found out that he was going to miss a varsity match, possibly 2. And I'll tell you what, he's playing lacrosse, and he's on the varsity lacrosse squad as a 9th grader this spring. Haven't had a problem, all A's and B's, because he said to me, Dad, I let my team down in the fall, and they lost a match because he was the number 3 golfer, and they play the top 8 versus top 8, and they brought a kid up from JV to take his place, and they lost by like 2 strokes, the team play, and his score is usually included. And then behavior, and I can speak personally, and my 2 older sons, every boy thinks he's going to get in a fight at some point in middle school or high school. And I can remember as a 10th and 11th grader, I had a kid a year older than me that picked on me for 2 years and would walk behind me in the school, and he'd say, hey, you can't turn around and fight, can you? Because you're going to get kicked off the team. And many times I turned around and said, yeah, you're right. Because I played football and baseball, and he picked on me and tried to fight with me many, many times through high school. But I knew that if I turned around and got into a fight, I might get kicked off the team. So with that said, I think adding as many middle school sports as possible you might not even need to have that extra position. Any thoughts? Good ones?
Heather McCreary, East Coventry. I just want to say thank you guys for this team. That was a very good presentation, and also the information about the bus drivers. But I wrote to you guys about adding a source of revenue, which is the pay-to-play. And I did more research after I sent my other email to you, and I'm wondering if you guys have looked at it, because I actually was shocked that almost every district around us charges something. And Great Valley was like $750 max for the family. So it's not a penalty tax on people that want to do athletics or musical. It's a way to offset the expenses of hiring the teachers to do that, or coaches, right, or the extra things that we want to do. So I think it's probably time that this district look at it. We seem to be the only one not doing it. I don't know how Jackie works her magic in the boxes of where it comes in or not, but, you know, we still never, you guys You guys still didn't answer the question of what happened to the ESERS-funded math teachers and how the math is going to get supplemented, because having the STEAM people and not supporting them with the math and going up through the middle school and the high school doesn't continue that program. As much as I enjoyed the presentation that Heidi gave, and like Mrs. Terrell said, our children didn't really get that when we went through here, but I feel like you still need to focus on the special ed students, the extra health and PE classes, and understand that when a child gets to middle school and they have to take learning support, they do not get STEAM, they don't get the language, and a lot of them are stuck on math. So I think good job so far, but I think you guys still have some questions that you need to ask and get the answers to.
Good evening, Colleen Blute, North Coventry, East Coventry Township. Thank you, Rita, for changing the meeting times. Thank you for changing the meeting times. I think that was a great idea. And as far as the Zoom, I agree with you. People need to come to the meetings to meet their board members in person and get to know them. You can do one thing on a screen and you can do one thing off a screen. And if anything I've learned as a teacher is it's way different in person than on a screen. Thank you. On a sad note, I'm here with a question. Owen J. Roberts is an affluent community. Rumors in the community were that the prom was horrendous. It was like a mess. The food was terrible, according to the kids. Students reserved tables to sit with their friends and were moved. The dance floor wasn't big enough. As a school district, we expect our community to support us, yet we're not supporting the businesses in the area. You have a wonderful facility down here, Meredith Manor. You have an outstanding facility in Pottstown called Sunnybrook Ballroom. 4 school districts had their proms in Sunnybrook Ballroom. 2 school districts went together. One had it on Friday, one had it on Saturday. They combined together and made a beautiful, beautiful setting for their prom. You didn't have to drive on 422. Do you know how many accidents are on 422 a night? I can tell you right now, there's 2 every night at 422 and 724. Every single night there's an ambulance going down there, right past my house, or my mother's house. Not a good idea. Bring it back to Pottstown where it's supposed to be, or Meredith Manor. Look into the other places. Separate it into a junior prom and a senior prom. Why do you have to have them together? The third thing was, recently it was discussed at a meeting where students were injured and required defibrillators, and defibrillators were locked up. I think the school district needs to start investing in defibrillators in the stadium that are accessible when they're needed. Yes, you have an ambulance there for football, but not for soccer, not for girls hockey, and not for track. You need a defibrillator between the upper fields. That one should be under lock and key, or at least open, or somebody there with a defibrillator. We don't need to have anything happening to our athletes. They work too hard. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Greg Engelhart with at East Vincent. I was going to just say something about wrestling, but I do want to comment really quickly about defibrillators. AEDs are a lifesaver. Sudden death, cardiac sudden death is the #1 killer, instant killer of kids and young adults for an arrhythmia called ventricular tachycardia. It's undiagnosed until it actually happens. If the AED is locked up, it's a problem. It needs to be accessible. I did not know that they were locked up. I don't know where they are. There should be big signs. And now that I'm thinking about it with kids that have not only graduated from athletics here, but also still playing and going to participate, they really need to be there. And companies like Zola, Medtronic, Stryker, they've got affordable ones, and they've got a lot of programs to get them into schools, as many as we need. If you need help with that, let me know. Okay. in regards to sports, I'm very passionate about wrestling as I have two sons that went through our really amazing wrestling program with Coach Durafalo and Coach Brilla. One is a sergeant in the U.S. Army, and he talks about every day how wrestling really kind of helped him get to where he is and his success. And I have another son that is on athletic scholarship for wrestling in college. Their youngest sister loves wrestling, and she's been wrestling for a while now, but she's very nervous about going to high school and having to wrestle against the boys because she's noticed as their body has changed and the boys' bodies are changing, it's a lot more difficult for her to be competitive in that environment. With that being said, this isn't something that's not noticed across the country. Girls wrestling is the fastest growing sport in all sports in the United States. There's now over 120 Division I or Division II, so they offer athletic scholarships, wrestling programs, including 9 in the state of Pennsylvania at the collegiate level. In fact, there's more wrestling scholarships available than there are female wrestlers. So they got a great opportunity to help them get higher education. And last, and again, I didn't know we were gonna be able to comment, or I would have just saved it. So I apologize, but there are now 107 schools in Pennsylvania that have wrestling programs in there. The reason why is because it is cost effective. The girls are gonna be there anyways. They're gonna be on the mats wrestling with the boys. Whether you have a girls team and a boys team separate, they're gonna be on one team if you don't. They all need uniforms, right? They also play their headgear and their shoes, so it's just uniforms, but the cost is already built in. And the tournaments host now boys division and girls division, so they're not even having to go to separate tournaments outside of rare circumstances. So the financial cost of adding a girls team, and I worked with the coaches to do this, would be sub $4,000. Completely top to bottom, additional ref fees, maxed out transportation, if girls made it to states, hotel rooms and all that. So, and we could get that financed, but I know as a sanctioned sport, that's really not looked at. But it is a great opportunity for those girls. There are 7 of them, including 2 upperclassmen that have said, I will wrestle if we have a girls team. And again, 5 girls that were on the middle school team last year that will be on the high school team this year. 4 of them are state qualifiers. In the middle school, we'll have 5 girls, including 1 that was a state champion this year. And there's over 30 girls in the Norchester wrestling program at the youth level throughout our district alone. So again, there's a lot of support coming up with it being one of the fastest growing sports, a lot of opportunity, and the travel is really, they just ride with the boys. So I hope you consider that when you think about sports to add, as it doesn't have an impact in a lot of the things that you're talking about, what it does. And as long as the PIAA sanctions it in a couple of weeks, I hope you would support it. Thank you.
Okay. We good? Okay. I am adjourning the meeting.
Wait.
Oh, really? Okay.
Okay, just 2 little comments, sorry. You're pretty fast, aren't you? Well, you know, since LMP had no quorum, I do want to just have a shout out Mr. Bentman because he did a very nice job with the summary of the policies that LMP went over this year and the policies that we haven't looked at for the last couple of years. So I encourage everybody to look at that. And also, you know, we did pass a resolution back at the last business meeting, but since the week is here, let's appreciate our teachers.
Okay. Thank you. That was worth the extra time, John. Thank you. And now I officially adjourn the meeting at 8:54. Thank you.